Ladies and gentlemen, the conference is about to begin. Please take your seats.
الخير واهلا وسهلا فيكم ببيفكس 2017. ادعو الى المنصه تباعا وزير الثقافه غطاس خوري ممثلا رئيس الحكومه سعد الحريري، وزير الصناعه حسين الحاج حسن، وزير الاقتصاد رائد خوري، رئيس اتحاد الغرف الاستاذ محمد شقير، ورئيس جمعيه تراخيص الامتياز الاستاذ شار العربي. نفتتح بيفكس 2017 بالنشيد الوطني اللبناني. أهلا وسهلا فيكم مرة جديدة ببيفكس 2017. مرة جديدة نعود إلى بيفكس، مرة جديدة نؤكد مع جمعية تراخيص الامتياز ورئيسها الأستاذ شار العربيد وأعضائها أن الهم الأول والأخير يبقى لبنان وصورته وإنتاجه وشبابه، وبكلمة واحدة مستقبله. اليوم نحن بحاجة أكثر من أي وقت مضى لنجعل بالفعل من لبنان علامة فارقة في هذا العالم. لا نريد فقط أن نتكل على إرث أو على سمعة، وهو أمر بالطبع نتغنى به، إلا أننا نريد بالفعل حاضراً مستقراً منتجاً مبدعاً، نريده طريقاً لمستقبل غني بالطاقات والاستثمارات والرؤى التي تشكل خارطة طريق للحكم وللمجتمع المدني وكل قوى الإنتاج. بيفكس 2017 هو محطة مضيئة في هذا الإطار، هو شمعة مضاءة في ظلمة اللامبالاة، نأمل أن تساهم في مساعدة من يملكون الإرادات الطيبة والتصميم كي يكون لبنان واللبنانيون أولوية. بيفكس 2017 انطلق ونتمنى له النجاح. يحمل لبنان في الداخل والخارج همه أن يبقى هذا البلد علامة فارقة بوجوده وإنتاجه وفكره وثقافته وبمستقبل شبابه. لم يترك مناسبة على الصعيد الوطني العام وفي كل فرصة خارج البلد إلا وجعل منها وسيلة لتسويق ما يؤمن به من قدرات لبنانية ورسم خارطة طريق تقود لبنان وإنتاجه والمنتجين فيه إلى وحدة اقتصادية متطورة تساهم في تسويق صورة أجمل عن لبنان. كلمة رئيس جمعية تراخيص الامتياز الأستاذ شار العربيد.
صاحب الرعاية دولة الرئيس سعد الحريري ممثلا بمعالي وزير الثقافة الدكتور غطاس خوري، معالي وزير الصناعة الدكتور حسين الحاج حسن، معالي وزير الاقتصاد والتجارة الأستاذ رائد خوري، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، حضرة رئيس اتحاد الغرف اللبنانية السيد محمد شقير، السادة رؤساء الهيئات الاقتصادية، زملائي في الجمعية، أيها الحضور الكريم. باسمي وباسم زملائي في الجمعية اللبنانية لتراخيص الامتياز أرحب بكم في منتدى بيروت السابع للفرنشايز بيفكس 2017. نلتقي اليوم ولبنان لا يزال في مرحلة دقيقة تواجه قياداته ومجتمعه تحديات استثنائية قد تكون ميأسة لولا إيمان اللبنانيين وعزيمتهم وثقتهم بغد أفضل. لا نبالغ في القول أن اقتصادنا الوطني لم يعد قادراً على توفير العمل المجدي والعيش الكريم لطاقاته البشرية والمعرفية، فتحول لبنان إلى مصدر للكفاءات، وباتت تحويلات اللبنانيين في الخارج على رغم تراجع حجمها الدعامة الأولى للنمو، ولم يعد هذا الواقع يؤدي إلى التقدم المجتمعي المستدام. من هنا يتساءل البعض: أنبقى في لبنان أو نغادر؟ أنستثمر هنا أو لا نستثمر؟ أنأمل أو نتشائم؟ لأن للبنانيين مناعة وقدرة على مواجهة التحديات وتحويلها إلى آفاق وفرص واعدة. نقول لكل المتسائلين والمشككين والمترددين وبكل تأكيد: سنبقى ونستثمر ونأمل. إن الخلاف السياسي لا يلغي الإيجابيات، فهذا في صلب الحياة السياسية والممارسة الديمقراطية، وهو صحي إذا أنتج تشريعات وسياسات مفيدة. على القوى السياسية أن تشعرنا بأنها تعمل فعلاً لتحقيق قفزة نوعية لاستعادة الدولة زمام المبادرة وتحديث وتطبيق القوانين لبناء الثقة وتوسيع مساحات التلاقي بين اللبنانيين شعباً ومؤسسات وأحزاب. أيها الحضور الكريم، لقد نجحت الدولة في تعزيز الأمن والاستقرار وفي رفع مستويات الطمأنينة، وهي عناصر أساسية للنهوض الاقتصادي والاجتماعي، ولكن لا بد من الخروج من دوامة العجز واستسهال رفع الاقتطاعات الضريبية لتمويل الاحتياجات والمطالب، ولا بد من الانتقال من مرحلة تلبية المطالب إلى مرحلة التخطيط ورسم السياسات التي تطور الاقتصاد وتحقق الأهداف الاجتماعية بما يتوافق مع مواهب وقدرات المجتمع اللبناني. لقد مل اللبنانيون من القرارات المؤجلة وترى في اللعب على حافة الهاوية وحلول الدقيقة الأخيرة. الملف الاقتصادي الاجتماعي شائك، وهو يتطلب جرعات زائدة من الحوار والصبر والعمل الدؤوب للجمع بين آراء ومصالح مختلفة ومتناقضة أحياناً وصولاً إلى قواسم مشتركة. لقد حدد فخامة رئيس الجمهورية ثوابت العمل على الإصلاح، وتوافقنا جميعاً على الالتزام بمحاربة الفساد لتنقية شرايين الاقتصاد من الرواسب التي تؤثر على إنتاجيتنا وعلى سمعة بلدنا. إننا نسعى إلى ما يوحدنا لنستعيد ثقتنا بوطننا ولنرفع مجدداً سمعة لبنان في المحيط والعالم، لأن أجمل ما فيه هو ميزاته وتراثه وثقافته ودوره ورسالته. لبنان قصة فريدة تستحق السرد، لذا أطلقت الجمعية اللبنانية لترخيص الامتياز مبادرة براندنج لبنان، التي أصبحت اليوم مشروعاً جامعاً يؤسس لرسم استراتيجية وطنية لبناء وتطوير وحماية العلامة الفارقة لبنان، مبنية على عظمة شعبنا وبلدنا وإبداعنا.
An evolving epic since the dawn of history. A country's reputation is its most precious asset, because reputation affects competitiveness. Lebanon needs a brand to tell its story and connect emotionally with the public. Products, services, places, but also experiences and lifestyles make the essence and identity of brand Lebanon. We are innovative, industrious, adventurous, resilient, we lead a unique way of life. Brand Lebanon can tell our incredible story and improve our country's image, enhance its reputation, attract investment, boost growth, help build our national economy. Brand Lebanon can unite citizens to shape a more dynamic nation. The Lebanese diaspora is part of our brand equity, our global business network, our strategic depth. Let's work hand in hand on this national initiative and build Brand Lebanon together.
لقد حقق اللبنانيون نجاحات فريدة، ونسعى من خلال مشروعنا إلى تعزيز صورة لبنان الوطن وإبقائه محط أنظار وإعجاب الكثيرين من حولنا. وفي الختام، إذ أجدد شكري إلى دولة الرئيس على الرعاية الكريمة، وإلى الحضور على مشاركته القيمة، وإلى شركائنا الاستراتيجيين والداعمين، وإلى كل وسائل الإعلام، يبقى الشكر الكبير لفريق العمل وللجهاز الإداري ولزملائي في الجمعية اللبنانية لتراخيص الامتياز على ثقتهم ودعمهم. أن يبقى المرء إيجابياً في زمن السلبيات، ليس براءة وبساطة، بل ريادة وقيادة. فلنسرد قصة وطننا ولنحمي جميعاً العلامة الفارقة لبنان.
أن تناضل وتكافح في هذا البلد اقتصادياً، وأن تصمم على النجاح وإنقاذ ما يمكن إنقاذه، وأن لا تهتم سوى بالصورة اللبنانية وجمالها، ما هو إلا تحد يستلزم إرادة مستمرة. هذه هي حال رئيس اتحاد الغرف الأستاذ محمد شقير، الذي يحمل الهم الاقتصادي اللبناني أينما ذهب وأينما تكلم. لم ييأس ولن يستسلم حتى يرى بالفعل أن إرادة الحياة في هذا البلد قد انتصرت. الكلمة للأستاذ محمد شقير.
صباح الخير. دولة رئيس مجلس الوزراء سعد الحريري ممثلا بمعالي الوزير غطاس خوري، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، أيها الأصدقاء والزملاء، للسنة السابعة على التوالي يسطر منتدى بيفكس النجاح تلو النجاح. إنه فعلا علامة لبنانية فارقة نفتخر ونعتز بها، وبكل تأكيد هذا لم يكن ليحصل لولا فريق عمل مميز ومبادر ومبدع برئاسة صديقي شارل عربيد. لذلك أرى أنه حان الوقت وبعد هذا النجاح على المستوى الوطني أن يأخذ هذا المنتدى بعده المتوسطي. لقد تدرج بيفكس بطرح المواضيع ذات البعد الاستراتيجي التي تمس عصب الاقتصاد اللبناني، واليوم كالعادة تفاجئنا جمعية الفرنشايز وشارل بطرح براندنج لبنان، تسويق العلامة الفارقة لبنان. أنها فعلا أم الأفكار، لأنها توجهت مباشرة إلى الأساس وإلى كل شيء في آن، أي إلى لبنان وإلى كل مكوناته الثقافية والحضارية والطبيعية والجغرافية والاقتصادية والخدماتية والإبداعية والبشرية. نعم، إنها الخلطة الرهيبة لهذا اللبنان، وهي السر الكامل لقدرته على الخروج في كل مرة من الملمات والأزمات ومن تحت النار والرماد. واليوم تأتي مبادرة براندنج لبنان لتضع هذه الفرادة والتميز في متناول العالم، وهذه مسؤولية وطنية تقع على عاتقنا جميعاً، دولة وقطاع خاص ومجتمع مدني وإعلام، للإضاءة على ميزاتنا التفاضلية التي تتعلق بثقافتنا وتاريخنا وإرثنا الحضاري وإنتاجنا وطريقة عيشنا وتعلق شعبنا بحب الحياة، وعلى شواطئنا وجبالنا وشمسنا ومناخنا ومطبخنا وخدماتنا التي لا تنسى. أيها السيدات والسادة، بكل تأكيد أن ما يطرحه بفكس اليوم هو حاجة وطنية، خصوصاً بعد كل هذا التخريب لصورة بلدنا على المستويين الوطني والعالمي. فنحن فعلاً بحاجة إلى ترسيخ الشعور الإيجابي للمواطن اللبناني أولاً تجاه بلده عبر إزالة هذه الصورة النمطية السلبية التي علقت في ذهنه بعد سنوات من الأزمات والضخ الإعلامي المصاحب. كما أن حاجاتنا كبيرة لإعطاء صورة إيجابية ومشرقة عن لبنان على المستوى العالمي وتحسين سمعته التي تعتبر الأساس لترسيخ الاستقرار وجذب الاستثمار السياحي والنهوض. أيها الحضور الكريم، من المهم جداً أن تأتي هذه المبادرة بالتزامن مع انطلاق دورة الحياة السياسية في البلاد، مع انتخاب رئيس الجمهورية وتشكيل حكومة استعادة الثقة. لكن الأهم أن يعي الجميع أن البلد اليوم أمام فرصة تاريخية لإخراجه من عنق الزجاجة. لذلك المطلوب تكاتف الجميع لترسيخ الاستقرار السياسي والعمل على إنهاء كل المظاهر السلبية وإرساء قاعدة ممارسات إيجابية لمعالجة كل المشكلات. والمطلوب أيضاً توفير مناخ مؤات للأعمال ومحفز للاقتصاد، وليس مثلاً فرض المزيد من الضرائب الذي يهدد ما تبقى من مؤسسات. اليوم في ظل الاستقرار السياسي والأمني الذي ينعم به بلدنا، نحن فعلاً أمام فرصة حقيقية لإحراز تقدم على هذا المسار. فلبنان وانطلاقاً من هذا الواقع بات محط أنظار الدول الراغبة في تحسين موقعها الاقتصادي في المنطقة، وقد لمسنا هذا الأمر خلال زيارتنا الأخيرة إلى روسيا. كما لمسنا أيضاً الحاجة الماسة لتسويق لبنان في الخارج، خاصة أن هذا الموضوع شكل مطلباً لمعظم المسؤولين الروس بهدف إطلاع شعبهم على مقومات بلدنا السياحية لاعتماده كمقصد لأبناء بلدهم الراغبين بالسياحة على شواطئ المتوسط. أختم كلمتي بالتأكيد أن لبنان هو أمانة في أعناقنا، ومسؤوليتنا تحتم علينا جميعاً الحفاظ على مقوماته وقدراته وطاقاته وتطويرها، لأنها هي سر وجوده ووجودنا في العالم. وشكراً.
في الطب علاج للألم الجسدي ومحاولات مستمرة من أجل تحقيق الشفاء، وفي الثقافة علاج للعقل والفكر والروح والذوق. وقد قيل إن العقل السليم في الجسم السليم، ولكن الأصح أن عقلا سليما وجسما سليما يتطلب معالجا للأمرين معا، وهي حالة يجسدها بوضوح وزير الثقافة الدكتور غطاس خوري. الكلمة لممثل رئيس الحكومة وزير الثقافة غطاس خوري، فليتفضل.
صباح الخير جميعا. معالي الوزراء، رؤساء الغرف التجارية، أيها الحفل الكريم، السيدات والسادة، كنت أقرأ رواية أمريكا للأستاذ ربيع جابر، وفيها يتحدث عن مرتا حداد، شابة فقيرة وجميلة من جبل لبنان، سافرت إلى نيويورك عام 1913 تبحث عن زوجها، وبعد ذلك بسنوات نراها في كاليفورنيا ثرية ومحاطة بأبناء وبنات وأحفاد، وفي مسار وتطور هذه الرواية أعتقد أن فكرة الامتياز من غير أن يدري أصحابها من أهل لبنان قد بدأت حينها. فاللبنانيون المهاجرون إلى الأرض الجديدة عملوا في البدايات بالكشة، يطوفون بها على المنازل في البلدات المختلفة محملين البضائع على أنواعها، وبعد أن استقر بهم الوضع الاقتصادي والمالي صاروا يعطون هذا الامتياز لمجموعة من الراغبين عبر تزويدهم بالبضائع من مخازنهم مقابل ربح معين بالإضافة إلى ثمن هذه البضائع. أكيد كانوا كاثوليك. الحضور الكريم، قصدت من هذه المقدمة أن أقول أن الإنسان أينما حل ينقل معه عاداته وتقاليده ومفهومه للحياة، أي ينقل معه ثقافته التي تؤثر وبدون أدنى شك في مسار حياته ومستقبلها. ونحن نؤمن جميعاً أن للثقافة تأثير في عملية التنمية الشاملة إلى جانب الجوانب الاقتصادية والسياسية والاجتماعية، وكلنا يذكر الضجة والاهتمام لكتاب صراع الحضارات أو صدام الحضارات الذي أكد على أهمية الثقافة كعامل أساسي للتنمية أو الصدام بين الجماعات البشرية. هذا واضح إذا ما نظرنا حولنا في العالم أجمع، فهو منقسم إلى مناطق تشكلت على أسس ثقافية ودينية. السيدات والسادة، إن العمل الدؤوب والجهد المستمر الذي نقوم به من خلال الترويج للعلامات التجارية اللبنانية هو بنفس الوقت عمل ينشر الثقافة اللبنانية وتصديرها عبر المأكل والمشرب والتصاميم والأزياء والحرف وما إلى ذلك، وهي تحمل دلالات على ثقافة اللبناني وطريقة عيشه. إن انتشار العلامات التجارية اللبنانية في العالم هو تمثيل لوطننا يكمل عمل السفارات والقنصليات والجمعيات والمؤسسات اللبنانية، وهذا كله تأكيد على تميز وطننا وفرادة أبنائه. أخيراً، أنا اليوم شرفني دولة الرئيس بتمثيله رغم أنه كان يود أن يكون شخصياً في هذا الحفل، ولكن تعرفون أننا أنتجنا هذه السنة امتياز بدون ترخيص، وهذا الامتياز هو تسوية سياسية أدت إلى انتخاب العماد ميشيل عون رئيساً للجمهورية وتأليف حكومة وطنية التي استطاعت في فترة قصيرة إقرار الموازنة والتعيينات الأمنية والإدارية، وأيضاً استطاعت أن تطلق عجلة الاقتصاد في عدة مجالات. ما زال أمامنا مهمة أساسية، وأظن أن رئيس الحكومة منكب عليها، وهي إنجاز قانون للانتخاب قبل 15 شهر القادم. وأنا أردت فقط أن أطمن الهيئات الاقتصادية وكل الحاضرين هنا أننا سوف ننجز هذه التسوية إن شاء الله، وسوف يكون لنا قانون للانتخاب وانتخابات إن شاء الله، وتتجدد الحياة السياسية التي هي رمز الاستقرار. أتمنى لمؤتمركم النجاح والوصول إلى الآمال المعقودة، والسلام عليكم.
في الاقتصاد يترافق العلم والخبرة والنظرة نحو المستقبل، وفي الاقتصاد يكون هم المواطن أولوية لأنه هو المستثمر والمنتج والمستهلك. وفي الاقتصاد ليست المسألة مسألة وظيفة إدارية في وزارة، إنها رؤية تساهم في الوصول إلى مستقبل ومستوى معيشي أفضل، وهذا ما يفعله الوزير رائد خوري في وزارة الاقتصاد. الكلمة للوزير رائد خوري، فليتفضل.
صباح الخير. معالي الوزير دكتور غطاس خوري، ممثل دولة الرئيس سعد الحريري، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، سيداتي سادتي أيها الحضور الكريم، يشرفني أن أكون بينكم اليوم في حفل افتتاح مؤتمر بيفكس 2017 تحت عنوان Boosting Prosperity برعاية دولة رئيس مجلس الوزراء السيد سعد الحريري. هذا المؤتمر الذي أثبت على مر الأعوام قدرته على الجمع بين نخبة من الرسميين والخبراء والمحليين والدوليين وممثلين عن القطاعين الخاص والعام ليوفر لهم منصة للتلاقي ولتبادل الخبرات والأفكار وأفضل ممارسات وقصص النجاح. سيداتي سادتي، يعد قطاع الفرانشايز في لبنان الأداة الأمثل لتحقيق النمو الاقتصادي والحد من البطالة، خصوصاً وأن هذا القطاع بات ينمو بشكل مثير للإعجاب وبوتيرة تجعل من لبنان سباقاً مجال تراخيص الامتياز وفي مقدمة الدول العربية في هذا المجال. ويأتي ذلك نتيجة توافر جميع العناصر المساهمة في نجاح القطاع، وأهمها الرأسمال البشري اللبناني الذي أكد قدرته على المبادرات والابتكار والمتفوق في الترويج والتطوير والتصميم، ما يؤهل بيروت لتكون مقصداً للشركات العالمية والإقليمية. فلبنان هو the trend setter، والامتياز هو الصورة التي لطالما ظهر بها إلى العالم. من هنا تأتي أهمية لقاؤنا اليوم للبحث في سبل تحقيق المزيد من التقدم في قطاع الفرانشايز، والحث على ضرورة التنسيق بين كافة الوزارات المعنية والاقتصاد والصناعة والزراعة والسياحة ومع ممثلي القطاع الخاص، نظراً لما يعود به هذا القطاع من فوائد هامة على الاقتصاد، أهمها تحفيز الاستثمارات وزيادة الصادرات وخلق فرص العمل وتحقيق الازدهار والنمو. أيها الحضور الكريم، إن انتخاب رئيس الجمهورية وتشكيل الحكومة الحالية قد انعكسا استقراراً أمنياً وسياسياً، وهو ما يحتاجه كل قطاع في لبنان للنمو والتطور. فقطاع الفرانشايز بات قادراً في ظل الأوضاع الأمنية والسياسية المستقرة اليوم على تحقيق المزيد من التقدم والاستفادة من الأجواء الإيجابية للبناء على ديناميكية رجال الأعمال وتحفيزهم نحو المزيد من الاستثمارات لمواكبة التطورات العالمية. من هنا نرى ضرورة في وضع استراتيجية اقتصادية تقوم على الشراكة بين القطاعين العام والخاص، وتشدد على أهمية تدعيم الإنتاجية وتعزيز التنافسية، ويتم من خلال هذه الاستراتيجية تحديد مسؤولية كل من الأطراف لضمان تحقيق الأهداف المنشودة. في الواقع إن قطاع الفرانشايز هو أكثر القطاعات قدرة على توفير قيمة مضافة لبوابة الاستثمار ونجاح الاقتصاد اللبناني، خصوصاً من خلال أولاً التوسع والانتشار السريع في الأسواق الإقليمية والعالمية، ثانياً زيادة الاستثمار في المشاريع الصغيرة والمتوسطة وتحفيز الشركات المحلية على المنافسة بما يرفع من جودة المنتج أو الخدمة التي تقدمها للمستهلك، ثالثاً الإسهام في تطوير الأيدي العاملة الوطنية من خلال التدريب ونقل الخبرة والمعرفة، ما يساعد في رفع كفاءة القوى البشرية. سيداتي سادتي، تضع وزارة الاقتصاد والتجارة المؤسسات الصغيرة والمتوسطة الحجم وسبل الارتقاء بها على رأس أولوياتها، وبالتالي يبرز الدور الذي تقوم به الجمعية اللبنانية لتراخيص الامتياز لناحية المساهمة في تحفيز نمو المؤسسات الصغيرة والمتوسطة الحجم في سياق الرؤية التي وضعتها الوزارة في نهاية عام 2014، وهي خارطة طريق تقوم على العديد من المبادرات الآيلة إلى تعزيز قيام مؤسسات فاعلة ومتطورة وقادرة على خلق الآلاف من فرص العمل، إضافة إلى إحداث نقلة نوعية في الاقتصاد تجعل منه اقتصاداً ذا قيمة مضافة عالية. في هذه المناسبة أود الإشارة إننا أطلقنا في 17 أذار من هذا العام خطة عمل لتحقيق أهداف الرؤية، تتضمن عقد سلسلة من حلقات حوار على شكل طاولة مستديرة تجمع كافة المعنيين من القطاعين العام والخاص للبحث في الاحتياجات والعوائق والتحديات التي تعترض عملية تطور هذه المؤسسات، إضافة إلى اقتراح الحلول والتوصيات والإجراءات الواجب اتخاذها لتطبيق الاستراتيجية أحسن تطبيق. وأود أن أعلن أننا سنقوم بعقد طاولة مستديرة نعلن عن موعدها قريباً، يكون موضوعها قطاع الفرانشايز في لبنان، آفاقه وتحدياته، لأننا نعي أن تطور هذا القطاع يعود بالفائدة على المستثمرين وعلى نمو المؤسسات الصغيرة والمتوسطة، ويصب في مصلحة اقتصادنا الوطني. في الختام، أتمنى لهذا المؤتمر والمشاركين فيه النجاح في مساعيهم، شاكراً الجمعية اللبنانية للامتياز برئاسة الصديق شارل عربيد على جهودها ومساهمتها الفاعلة في تنمية الاقتصاد الوطني. شكراً.
في كل وزارة تولى شؤونها كانت لديه القدرة المميزة على جمع المختلفين ومساعدتهم على حل مشاكلهم والاتفاق على ما فيه مصلحة الطرفين. هكذا هو في وزارة الصناعة، يمارس دور الحكم في الخلافات بين الصناعيين والناس، يستمع بدقة، يفكر بموضوعية، يرفع الصوت محذرا مما يراه أخطارا محدقة باقتصادنا، ولا يتوقف عن التحذير، إذ أن مسؤولية الناس بالنسبة له هي مسؤولية مقدسة. كلمة معالي وزير الصناعة حسين الحاج حسن.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. دولة رئيس الحكومة الأستاذ سعد الحريري، ممثلا بمعالي وزير الثقافة الدكتور غطاس خوري، معالي وزير الاقتصاد الأستاذ رائد خوري، أصحاب السعادة، الحضور الكرام، السيدات والسادة، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يشرفني اليوم أن ألبي مرة جديدة الدعوة إلى المشاركة في افتتاح منتدى بيفكس 2017 الذي تنظمه الجمعية اللبنانية لتراخيص الامتياز. هذه الجمعية بديناميكية أعضائها وحيويتهم وإبداعاتهم غدت في 10 سنوات من عمرها علامة مميزة بين الهيئات الاقتصادية، وهي تستحق ورئيسها السيد شارل عربيد التهنئة والشكر، التمنيات والدعم لمواصلة أنشطتها الهادفة إلى تحسين الاقتصاد. ويكفي لبنان فخراً أن قطاع الفرانشايز فيه يحتل الدرجة الأولى في محيطه العربي، وهذا الأمر يدل على إمكانات اللبنانيين وقدراتهم الإبداعية والابتكارية والفكرية والعلمية، كما على انفتاحهم وتواصلهم وتكيفهم واستعدادهم للتبادل والاستطلاع المعرفي والثقافي والتكنولوجي. اختار المنظمون هذا العام عنوانا جذابا وطموحا للمنتدى: العلامة الفارقة لبنان، دفع للازدهار. ولقد شاركت في بعض الاجتماعات التحضيرية للمشروع الذي أتبناه بالكامل، ذلك أن الهدف هو التسويق لاسم لبنان في الداخل وفي الخارج، مع ما يمكن أن يحقق ذلك من نمو وتقدم ورفاهية. الهدف هو تسويق مفاهيم لبنانية جديدة وأفكار بناءة وطريقة عيش راقية وأسلوب حياة محترمة وقيمة مضافة عالية. الهدف هو إظهار صورة لبنان الأصالة والجمال والحضارة والتاريخ والثقافة، لبنان السياحة والتراث والحداثة، لبنان المصارف والخدمات والتكنولوجيا، لبنان الصناعة والزراعة والإنتاج. أيها السيدات والسادة، لبنان الذي نتحدث عنه يحتاج إلى عملية إصلاح شاملة ومتكاملة في السياسة والاقتصاد والبنى التحتية والإدارة. يحتاج إلى إقرار موازنة بدأ نقاشها في لجنة المال والموازنة. يحتاج إلى خفض العجز في الموازنة. يحتاج إلى كبح نمو الدين العام. يحتاج إلى استخراج نفطه وغازه الذي بدأنا خطواته العملية. يحتاج إلى تحفيز اقتصاده. يحتاج إلى تخفيض معدلات البطالة والفقر وتحفيز معدلات النمو، وكل هذا يحتاج إلى عملية بناء وإصلاح. إن عملية البناء والإصلاح التي يفترض أن تحفز في عهد فخامة الرئيس العماد ميشيل عون وحكومة الرئيس سعد الحريري هي عملية صعبة، ولكنها ليست مستحيلة، خصوصاً أن النيات متوفرة والعمل جار والجهود متواصلة بالتوافق والحوار، ومنها العمل على إقرار قانون انتخابي جديد يتيح تساوي الفرص بين اللبنانيين، وفي رأينا يقوم على النسبية على أساس لبنان دائرة انتخابية واحدة. أيها السيدات والسادة، إن مبدأ التسويق يحتاج إلى أسواق تتلقى وترسل، تستورد وتصدر، وتتفاعل مع بعضها البعض، لكن المشكلة في لبنان أنه المتلقي الدائم والمستورد الدائم، وأنه ممنوع عليه أن يصدر بنفس النسبة التي يستورد بها، بل ممنوع عليه التصدير في كثير من الأحيان. سوق لبنان الصغير مفتوح أمام استيراد 19 مليار دولار بالعام 2017، وأسواق العالم والكرة الأرضية بسكانها 7 مليارات غير قادرة على الشراء من لبنان إلا ب3 مليارات دولار وأقل مما صنع في لبنان. لكسر هذه الحالة تسويق لبنان يحتاج إلى كسر الحواجز أمام صادراته، وكسر حواجز المعوقات الفنية والتقنية والرسوم الجمركية وغير الجمركية القائمة في دول العالم، ويحتاج إلى كسر معادلة تأشيرات الدخول المفتوحة إلى لبنان والممنوعة إلى دول العالم. يعني كم دولة اللي نحن رعاياهم بياخذوا الفيزا على المطار ومقابلهم طوابير اللبنانيين أمام أبواب السفارات لياخذوا الفيزا، حتى أمام رجال الأعمال، مش أمام حي الله عالم، أمام رجال الأعمال. عم نحكي عن تسويق، ما هيك؟ اقتصادنا متعثر وفئة كبيرة من اللبنانيين من دون عمل، والتجارة غير متكافئة، وهذا واحد من عناوين الإصلاح الاقتصادي، إصلاح العجز في الميزان التجاري. وتسويق لبنان أساس في تسويق صادراته، أو بالأحرى تسويق صادرات لبنان أساس في تسويق لبنان. أيها السيدات والسادة، إن اللبنانيين قادرون على الإنجاز في ظل الاستقرار السياسي والأمني، ولكنهم يحتاجون إلى استقرار اقتصادي ومالي. ورغم التباينات والاحتدام السياسي القائم، لا يزال الوضع في لبنان أفضل بكثير من عدد من الدول التي يئن بعضها في الاقتصاد والآخر يئن من الإرهاب التكفيري المجرم الذي دمر الاقتصاد والدول والجيوش والشعوب. إن الصعوبات التي أشرت إليها والتي نعرفها جميعا تعرقل المسيرة وتؤخرها، ولكنها لا تستطيع أن توقفها. نحن جميعا عازمون على حياة حرة كريمة، ومصممون على مواجهة كل التحديات وتخطي كل العراقيل والصعاب. إن هذه التحديات حافز لنا للعمل والتخطيط والبناء، وبناء دولة القانون والمؤسسات والفرص. إنها فرصة لدعم جيشنا وقوانا الأمنية للمحافظة على الأمن والاستقرار الذي ننعم به، وعلى مكافحة ومحاربة الإرهاب حتى ننتصر عليه. إنها فرصة وحافز للدفاع عن حقوقنا والتمسك بسيادتنا وبمواردنا الطبيعية والدفاع عنها. في الماضي حمل لبنان علامة فارقة حيث سمي سويسرا الشرق. نحن اليوم مدعوون إلى حمل نفس الشعلة، والتحدي أمامنا أن نعيد وطننا العزيز منارة للشرق ساطعة وكل أمل بأننا قادرون على تحقيق ذلك. عشتم وعاش لبنان.
شكرا لمعالي الوزراء، وشكرا للأستاذ محمد شقير والأستاذ شارل العربيد. بطلب منكم أن تفضلوا على المنصة لهون على الوسط لناخذ الصورة التذكارية بختام هالجلسة الافتتاحية. في عندنا كوفي بريك، وبعدين بنكون مع الندوة الأولى ببيفكس 2017.
Please enjoy a short networking coffee break.
skeletons still smoking our cigars.
Ladies and gentlemen, the conference is about to begin. Please take your seats.
مجددا بنرحب فيكم ببيفكس 2017 وبنكون مع أول بانل، وسأدعو إلى المنصة تباعا السيدة ميراي عون هاشم مستشارة فخامة رئيس الجمهورية على عماد ميشيل عون، السيد أليكس ويست، السيد يواكيم نورن، السيد تيم ويلكنسون، والسيد مايك نيهافرناكيس. طبعا هالندوة الأولى رح نشوف فيها كيف سينطلق أو كيف سيكون بداية مشوار الاستراتيجية الوطنية التي سنعمل في إطارها من أجل بناء العلامة الفارقة لبنان، وسيتم عرض خبرات وتجارب بتساعدنا بانطلاق هذه العملية. الكلمة بداية للسيدة ميراي عون هاشم، تفضل.
صباح الخير جميعا، وشكرا للاستاذ شارل عالبيد وللإفقا ولبيفكس لدعوتي لكون موجوده معكم اليوم. كوني بصفتي مستشارة فخامة الرئيس جربت من وقت ما انتخابه نركز اكيد على 3 مواضيع اساسيه بهمه هو انه يكون عهده مطبوع فيهم. اكيد اول، وهيدي انطلاقا من استاذ اللي علمني علم الاقتصاد، كان يقلنا اهم شيء بعلم الاقتصاد انه 3 فاكتورز. اول شيء political stability، وهيدا هو الموضوع اللي عم يشتغل عليه اليوم فخامة الرئيس كرمال بإرساء قانون انتخاب بيأمن لنا الاستقرار السياسي الحقيقي. وتاني نقطة كان الاستقرار الأمني، وثالث نقطة هي الاستقرار القضائي. هول 3 مكونات بيسمحوا لحيالله اقتصاد انه يقدر يكبر وينمى فيهم. وبما انه فخامة الرئيس كمان هو حابب انه عهده يكون عهد اعادة الازدهار الاقتصادي للبنان، هول ال3 نقاط اللي مركز عليهم حاليا. في رابع نقطة اللي كانت عزيزة اكثر على قلبي انا شخصيا من وراء تجربتي الشخصية، انه نحن شعب مميز، مع انه بلد صغير بس كمان مميزين. نحن يمكن بنعرف كتير منيح نبيع بس ما بنعرف نسوي. We are very good marketeers but we are very bad communicators. من انطلاقا من هالنقطة كنت عم بتحدث مع شارل انه كنت حابة النقطة الرابعة اللي نشتغل مع فخامة الرئيس عليها بعهده هي ليبانيز ريبابليك براندينج أكثر من ما هي ليبانون براندينج. وهالنقطة كانت لازم تساعد الشعب اللبناني تيرجع يتوحد حول صورة موحدة، بعدين يقدر يرجع يعملها يسوقها خارج لبنان. بقى تلاقينا أنا وشارل على هالنقطة، وعلى أمل مع رئيس الحكومة اللي رح التقيه غدا على هالنقطة إنه نكمل المشروعين مع بعضهم، ليبانيز ريبابليك براندينج بقلب لبنان، ونخلق كريدو للشعب اللبناني والبراند لبنان برات لبنان، إنه نرجع نوحد صورتنا ونرجع نؤمن بنفسنا. شكراً.
It's a great pleasure to be back in the Lebanon again. I was here last year and I did a presentation on the Great Britain campaign, which I led in 2011 and 2012. And I've got a very short presentation of about 10 minutes and a short film. I wonder if I can get the presentation up. which illustrates some of the work that's been going on over the past 12 months since I was here and since I've been talking and working with the LFA and Charles and his team around this concept of Brand Lebanon. So the next few slides are about how we create a framework for Brand Lebanon, but also a little bit about the importance and value of a brand for a country and a few examples of where it's been successful. First, I'd like to say we've been on an incredible journey. The journey has been a 10-year journey for the LFA, working around the world and understanding and learning about how people perceive Lebanon and Lebanese businesses and Lebanon as a country, and has learned an enormous amount and has obviously been championing this concept of a brand for Lebanon and a new way for Lebanon to communicate itself and to make itself stronger in the eyes of the world. And I've been a part of that journey for about 12 months since I was here. And it's been a collective effort. We've spoken both here and abroad to get opinions from journalists, country branding specialists, people in the banking sector. We've spoken to people in the government sector and various others, filmmakers, designers, a wide range of people to get an understanding of their thoughts on Brand Lebanon. And we've got a lovely panel here later who have great experience in branding different countries from Washington to Stockholm, and also Mike, who's in the British Foreign Office and who can help us understand how governments talk effectively abroad through their embassies. I don't know where I'm supposed to be. Sorry, technical. Okay, so why does a country need a brand? Because it can provide tangible benefits that keep on paying dividends. Short-term benefits are about where our audience starts to understand who we are a little better. And these are benefits that can come immediately. And one of those is enhanced national pride. I think no national campaign can be effective if the people of the country are not brought on that journey with the campaign itself, if they cannot feel pride in the campaign and take part of it. And I have one slide later of an extraordinary campaign run through Iceland, the tiny country of 350,000 people, where they engaged the local community with a very small budget and fundamentally changed the perception of Iceland in the world. And I think it's very relevant to what we're talking about here. Sorry. So increased tourism revenues. Those sorts of things should happen very, very quickly. And I'll talk a little later about the perception of Lebanon. And that's something that we can change straight away. I've been to Lebanon 3 times now, mainly to Beirut, and I fell in love with the place. And I'm going to be coming back as a tourist with my family. And I think everybody here today, well, why not? It's a beautiful country. And I think everybody here today, everybody who I know who's been here, who's visited here, who's said it is actually a great place, has always come back and always falls in love with it. So that should be an easy win for us. Increased foreign direct investment. People making banking decisions, of course, they look at World Bank reports, and of course they look at credit ratings, and your credit rating isn't too bad, but they also are interested in the emotional elements. Do I want to open an office here? Will my staff enjoy living here? And I would say, yes, there are huge opportunities for Lebanon in this. Increased trade. Sorry, my thing doesn't seem to work. Increased trade, of course, if people love Lebanon, they will buy Lebanese products more. If they understand it, they will buy products more. There was a statistic up earlier from the Minister of Industry, something like 13 billion in imports, or 16 billion in imports, and only 3 billion in exports. That's a number we can change with the right sort of campaign. An increased thought leadership role. We're here in a great conference centre with interesting people from around the world coming to work and talk with you. The Minister of Culture at a meeting back in February suggested that the Lebanon could be a place where we change the world, where we look at the rehabilitation and the redevelopment of troubled countries in our region and further afield. And we can take a thought leadership role in that. We are uniquely placed as a country to help with those problems because of our experiences. And I think that's something that we can quickly move on and that we can quickly start to develop and change perceptions. Again, Joachim, who we'll hear from later, Sweden, the tiny country of Sweden, holds a strong place in terms of how people listen to them. And they've established that through things like the Nobel Peace Prize and other initiatives. People listen to Sweden. They punch above their weight in thought leadership. Increased recognition. Last year I showed a slide with an aeroplane and it was an Emirates aeroplane. This year I'm showing a slide with an MEA aeroplane. And I think things like this, the flag bearers out around the country, nobody really understands MEA when it lands at Heathrow or it lands in Paris. Maybe they understand it more in Paris than they do at Heathrow. But let's make the national brand part of this. Let's make MEA part of this. Let's make the private sector part of this. Greater soft power. Very often when people come across the Lebanon, the first thing, certainly in the UK, they see a beautiful cedar tree in front of a stately home and the words Lebanese cedar resonate. It's this majestic thing that is known throughout the UK. Every single stately home or large country house in the UK has a Lebanese cedar in the garden. And that says an awful lot about the country. Chateau Mouzar I used as an example. I can buy it in my local supermarket. Again, it says an awful lot about brand Lebanon when people are drinking it and enjoying it. And so these are simple things that can change perception and give us the opportunity to talk about what we're doing. And we heard from the Minister of Culture earlier, we have an incredible cultural sector. We've got a great creative sector. We've got great designers and filmmakers and writers and artists. Let's engage with those people to develop our soft power, which will benefit our trade and investment. The medium to long-term benefits, as the ecosystem of business and as the ecosystem of relationships with the outside world grow and develop. Enhance supply chain and business services. As more people come here, as people trade more here, we need the services to supply those people and fulfill those business ambitions. So we start to develop those enhanced services and ecosystem. Stronger creative and innovation sectors, more advertising, more design, more technology. These things will all come as more people come, more trade comes, more investment comes. And you already have an incredible, and I would say in the region, unique ability within the creative sector. You've got great creative people here, you've got great architecture, you've got lots of great things to talk about. More developed knowledge economy. These things are key. How do we get more people to come and study at university here from around the world and then take their experiences home? The Foreign Office in London used to train all the Arabic specialists for all the posts across the Middle East in just outside Beirut. And that created generations of ambassadors and diplomats in the British Foreign Service who were passionate about the Lebanon because of the experiences they had. How can we learn from that, and how can we develop more of those sorts of activities to spread the word amongst influencers and spread the knowledge? The enhanced professional services sector. I'm not sure that more lawyers are needed by anybody, but on the other hand, of course they are, and of course they create jobs. You have a good legal system, you have a good banking sector. These are things, again, that we can concentrate on, that we can grow and develop. We had to have a picture of Donald Trump, the brand that got the biggest job on the face of the planet. And this is just an example of how without a brand, Donald Trump would never be president of the United States of America. But because he got a brand, he got influence. And because he managed his brand effectively and he had the support of the people, he managed to get the top job. It's the power of the brand to give you the influence you need and you deserve. South Korea, through its Hallyu campaign, has pushed soft power around the world, and Psy with Gangnam Style is a prime example of that, and there are lots of great studies. So through our culture, through our activities, we'll develop a better understanding and ultimately the love of other people around the world for the Lebanon. And when done well, this sort of thing can be hugely beneficial. This is, I'm not sure he's managing, this is the Great Campaign, which now gets £60 million a year from the British government, and it's a cross-party, it's across all the different ministries, and it's something that businesses engage in, and they encourage the use of this campaign. So British Airways support it, HSBC, all the SMEs, they all support the campaign, and all we did was create a simple truth: engineering is great. Nobody can argue with that. And then we put Britain just below it, and a picture of a British product, and it went around the world and everybody loved it. It was a very, very simple campaign. Countryside is great. You can claim this as well. Similar thing. Shopping is great. Undeniably, the new Zaha Hadid place down near the seafront, that's going to be great shopping, as are the souks as they stand. The Great Campaign created a 16% uplift in intention to invest in the UK in its first 2 years. 16%. And the budget at the start was quite small. And it was an extraordinary, we monitored and we continue to monitor the Great Campaign, and we continue to analyze the results. But a 16% uplift on a pretty solid economy is a pretty effective one. Imagine what we could do if the economy is not in that strong position. A 16% rise in intention to visit the UK over the next 12 months, because we took the main campaign, which was run out of number 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister's office, and the Minister of Tourism and Visit Britain all used the same campaign. So again, together, we worked together and we were stronger together. The next one, a 1.2 billion direct return on investment for trade, investment and tourism. In the first 2 years, there was an accountable 1.2 billion growth accountable to this campaign, outside of normal growth and obviously outside the standing trading conditions. And we use exporting is great to encourage businesses to talk to the government about how best they can export. So we encourage SMEs to get involved in that project. 69 million in the first 2 years was donated, cash and benefit in kind, by the private sector, who saw that a strong Britain looking good around the world was good for their business. Rolls-Royce realized that if Britain's looking good, they'll sell more cars. Marks and Spencer's, Debenhams, all those brands, both luxury and accessible, realized if we look good, they'll sell more. Inspired by Iceland, very quickly, is a wonderful small campaign. The budget was $1.25 million, I think it was dollars, might have been pounds, to promote Iceland. They'd had a terrible volcano, nobody was visiting, the financial crash had caused enormous hardship. So they started a campaign and they activated their population of 325,000 people, and they got a £71 million return on that investment. So they spent 1.2 and they got 71 million in benefit from that 1.2. And they got the country's people to tell the world how amazing Iceland is, and to tell stories and to post films and to invite their friends and invite their networks and be really, really social. And I think it's really, really interesting how they did that. There are lots of case studies online, and I think there's a real relevance here. It was the government, the Prime Minister went on and said, come to Iceland, and he told his people, and they worked with him because they were passionate about telling their story. It's a great case study. So how do we do this for Lebanon? Very, very briefly, I think it's sort of 8 slides to illustrate some of the thinking that we've established already and how we think the best way to promote Lebanon should be structured. We need to set reasonable ambitions. We don't need to be over-ambitious. We need to do things that we can achieve and that we think we can deliver. The ambitions would be to increase foreign direct investment, increase trade and increase tourism, and bring together the Lebanese people and our diaspora under a single banner in which we can all be proud. Something to say that everybody can engage with. We need to research. The perceptions of Lebanon vary wildly from place to place. And I think we need to really research what people genuinely think of Lebanon. We've obviously, the LFA has done quite a lot of work already on this, but I think there's more work to be done because opinions vary wildly from individual countries. So good research is essential. We need to identify our target. Target is a difficult word. We need to identify the people and the groups that we need to talk to. We need to talk to the diaspora. We need to get them more involved actively. We need to give them something specific to say. We need to talk to the Gulf states. We need to talk through the Gulf states to those who already have trading relationships, who already have an established relationship and an understanding and often a passion for the country. We need to talk to the rest of the world. And again, we need to talk to the people of Lebanon. And we can give the same message to everybody, but we have a different ambition for everybody. We're not going to expect Washington to start invest, or the banks in Wall Street to invest billions of pounds from day one, but let them come here. Let them talk here. Let them learn here. Let them love the Lebanon. And then they'll start to spend more money here. We need to create a realistic brief. And we feel the brief is to communicate Lebanon's strengths in a way which enables our partners, that's everybody in the Lebanon, to work together to more effectively and collaboratively tell our story. It's a simple, simple brief. We need to identify our strengths. These are our pillars for our campaign, the stories that we are proud of. And through our working and talking to journalists and various others, we feel we can be genuinely and authentically proud of our place, the country, our position in the world, physically as well as emotionally and in all other aspects. We can be proud of our people, the creativity of our people, the experience of our people, and how those stories can be told around the world, and how those stories of our people give us a right to talk stronger, talk bigger, and to be more effective. Creativity, we've touched on. Business, we have a great banking sector that did very well after 2008 when everybody else was struggling. That's a great bedrock that we can talk about. We have really effective businesses. We have great franchise structures. Those are things that we can communicate. Arts and culture, we've talked about. Magical arts and culture. Technology, we're starting down that road and we have some good opportunities. Knowledge, we've got 4,000 years of leading knowledge that we can talk about and we can shout about, and we've got great universities and we want people to come here. And heritage, of course, which we have in absolute bagloads, but not many people know about it in the Western world, or certainly in Europe, and we need to push that. We need to identify our partners. It's simple. It's the government, it's the public sector, it's all the ministries, it's anybody involved in the public sector, it's the private sector, because together we look better. It's the diaspora, and it's our people, because we need to do this together, because together we are stronger. We need to develop a great creative platform, one that is strong, one that is undeniable, it can't be argued with. We're not going to say we're the biggest financial center in the world, we're not. We're going to tell the truth, and we're going to be confident about what we're saying. We need to be intriguing. We need to get people to want to learn all the great stories about us. We need to be valued as a partner in the world and as a perception. And we need to be recognized as a country in our own right with unique skills and all those other things. We need to take our place in the world. We need to be different from other people. We need to be compelling. We need people to listen to us. We need to be respected. We need to be emotive, because this country is a country steeped in emotion and passion, and we should celebrate that, and we should talk about that. And we should be social. Like Iceland was, we should use the social channels to do everything we need to do. We then need simply to activate the platform by using every asset at our disposal. With Great Britain, we took all the budgets from all the departments and everybody, and with everybody agreed that if we pooled our resources and we pooled our budgets and we pooled our manpower, we would do a better job for everybody. So we need to think about how we can potentially do that. So our public sector budgets, our private sector partners and their budgets. Let's get the successful companies and the banks who are going to benefit to invest in this as a project and to make this part of their promotion around the world, because again, together we are stronger. We need our people involved, so let's give them the things to say. We need our diaspora, and by pooling our assets and resources, everyone benefits. We now have, you've heard enough from me, and now we'll go on to our panel. I've got a very short film that I'd like to show, which is, it's probably not as good as Charles's, but a bit of competition. But it gives sorry, play the film. Doesn't it look great? And the world should know. The panel. I've got a number of questions for everybody on the panel, but it would be great, maybe, I think everybody knows you, Muriel, so maybe if the other members of the panel could introduce themselves.
Okay. My name is Joakim Norén. I used to work for the Swedish Institute for 7 years. I was head of strategy unit and I was project manager for developing the Swedish brand strategy. Now I'm a freelance management consultant.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tim Wilkinson. I'm chairman of Bell Pottinger, which is a public relations company headquartered out of London. I'm based in Dubai, the UAE, where I've lived since 1991. I actually first came to Beirut in 91, so I've seen it evolve over the course of the last few decades. And I'm very glad to be back and very happy to be part of this discussion. I've worked on national brands both in the Gulf and outside. My latest work on national brands has been in Kuwait and most recently in the UAE, as we've tried to think about the UAE as one place versus a number of different identities within one place. And I'm happy to share some thoughts and be involved in this discussion with you today.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Nithivrianakis, and I am a career diplomat with the British Foreign Service who has taken a sabbatical and set up my own consulting company. I have done 6 overseas postings representing the United Kingdom internationally, most recently in India, where I was the senior diplomat in the south of India, based in Chennai. And since 2013, I've been running Castle Gordon, supporting British companies, Indian companies, companies from the Gulf to do business in each other's territories and regions. And I've spent a lot of my career helping British companies trade internationally and foreign companies invest in the United Kingdom. So I hope I might have some experiences and observations that could be of use to Brand Lebanon.
Thank you. Mariella, you're the first question, I think. What do you think are the biggest barriers to establishing Brand Lebanon?
Currently, we have some obsolete administration, and we are working on it in order to facilitate such projects. You were talking about putting all the budgets all together to help launch this creative platform, and hopefully we will all be together to make this project successful. But our main issue is that the Lebanese citizens are not united around what is Lebanon for them. So I really hope, and we will do all the necessary effort to bring all the barriers around to be helpful.
Yeah, okay, great, good. And I think that's really important, is bringing people on that journey, getting them to feel a sense of ownership over the journey that we're going to go on, so they can all take part. Tim, to you, you've worked all over the world in the private sector for people like British Airways and Coca-Cola, and you've worked for governments in Washington and Kuwait and the UK, and you know Lebanon. What is the thing that you feel we should be most confident about shouting out about and telling the world?
Well, I think your presentation covered many different areas, and I don't want to be subjective about that, but I think the things that I find interesting from working on national brands is, and just to pick up on that point, one of the key things that I think you need to think about is leadership. And without strong leadership, when you're developing a national brand, you can suffer. You can suffer from a number of different vested interests and different parties. So I think you are never going to make everyone happy, but you need to find a way to drive and push a program through and work collaboratively with a number of different partners in order to make that happen. And that goes cross-ministry, cross-government, and then across into the private sector as well. So finding that collaboration, but having strong leadership to make it happen, I think is critical. And I've seen that in so many cases where you don't have those things, it ultimately falters. So I would encourage the group to think about how to push that through. The other thing I think is absolutely critical, and again, you had it in your presentation, is research. You have to start with research. You have to start with getting the insights right, understand what people think about you, understand what people believe about you, and then from that you can then begin to build your program and fill the vessel of your brand with a number of different elements that you feel are going to move people from here to there. One of the things that we've looked at, particularly in the UAE model, is using a political campaigning model and how you use that type of kind of progressive communication thinking to develop and then to play out a national brand exercise. So what you look at on one hand, you've got the people who are largely against you. On the other side, you've got your advocates. And the idea is you move people from the left-hand side of the chart to the right-hand side of the chart in order that you can find the sweet spot, which is essentially in the middle, ultimately. So you neutralize your negatives and then you enhance your advocates. And we found that to be a particularly useful exercise when we were playing this out from the UAE perspective.
Great, thank you. Joachim, I'd like to pick up on the point I talked about, which was identified by the Minister of Culture at a previous meeting, this concept of thought leadership and this concept of the Lebanon being seen as a place where we can host conversation and debate and become a thought leader in certain fields that we feel confident we can work in. Sweden obviously has done that very well. What are the lessons that the Lebanon should learn from the effectiveness of how Sweden's done that and some kind of idea of structure of how they've done that?
Well, Sweden has a long history of thought leadership, and we have been, for a long time, seen as a progressive country, and we have tried to be a progressive country. So it's not something we created from nothing, it's a long history of it. But I think Lebanon can learn a lot from Sweden, Sweden being a fairly small country as well. And when we at the Swedish Institute look at, for example, British Council and the resources they have, or the equivalents in Germany or France, we get, it's amazing how much money and how much resources they have, and we really have small resources to do the branding exercises and to work with promoting Sweden.
Yeah.
So I think there are a lot of things to learn, but I really think Lebanon is in a good position for thought leadership, being, from my perspective, from a Westerner's perspective, kind of a gateway to the Middle East and the Arabic world. And I was been here for a few times or for a few years ago when we researched for creating the Arabic version of Sweden.se. And I too fell in love with Beirut and Lebanon and thought it was a fantastic place and really want to come back. And I think it was a very welcoming place. And a place that I felt that it was easy to understand the Middle Eastern culture and the Arabic culture.
Interesting, yeah. I think that position on the borders of the Mediterranean and the natural point from East meets West and Islam and Christianity, I think that's a really fascinating place for us to be.
May I add, with a large diaspora, you have so many channels, communication channels to the rest of the world.
Yeah. Mike, what would be really interesting, because we talked about government and we've talked about international, I think what would be great is, could you say a little bit about how the British Foreign Office, the Foreign Ministry, works and uses its network of embassies to promote a country's brand and trade and things?
Sure, thank you, Alex. Well, it's an incredibly important part of a country's international representation to be able to adequately promote your business environment, the attraction to investors of your country. And in the British Embassy network internationally, we have diplomats and trade attaches doing that on a daily basis. It's important both for them to understand and highlight what is strong and brilliant about their country, but also to understand the perceptions of their country wherever they are posted. And that's important because we can sometimes not be particularly knowledgeable about what another country and its people think about us. So taking the time to perhaps research informally what they know is really important. And I think it's fair to say that within the British Foreign Service, a change has taken place in the last 10 years, probably supported by things like the Great Campaign, in that it's still important to understand the politics and economics of a country. It's still important to represent your nationals, whether they are resident or visiting that country, on consular affairs. There are a whole range of diplomatic priorities that are still critical. But the one that has become more important faster is that of trade and investment. Helping British companies be more successful internationally by supporting their exports in goods and services, and helping foreign businesses set up a presence in your country. And I think that's something that the diplomatic team can do with their own knowledge and government department support. But increasingly, it's about the collective effort that was mentioned in your slide, Alex, about leveraging all of the networks from government and the private sector and other stakeholders to make sure there is a unified message and that it's not organizations working in silos. And although diplomats may be the public face of the country overseas, there are lots of ambassadors. There are Lebanese companies that might be exporting to that country. There are diaspora that could have been living there for a long time. They are also your ambassadors and the champions that can highlight the best about your country, working hand in hand with the embassy network.
Great, interesting. Maria, the idea of the Lebanon as a hub, as a gateway for different parts of the world to communicate, I've always felt that could be something that's incredibly strong for us. Do you think that's a realistic possibility, where we could be seen by the world as this sort of center for that?
Yes, it really, sorry, it really is. It's also my personal experience. After living 15 years in France, and when I had my kids, and when my father came back to Lebanon in 2005, my husband and I were very well established in Paris professionally, and we were very well established. And when I asked myself, should I come back to Lebanon with my family or not? And my husband was not very positive about the idea. And my answer was, we can transmit our social values to our kids anywhere in the world. And by social values, I mean how to sit, how to eat well, how to be polite, how to behave. But there is one thing we cannot transmit, is that the human values we were raised up to by living in Lebanon, is how to communicate, how the عيش مشترك, how we live together. If they don't live this experience, we cannot transmit it to them. So this is what is very important about Lebanon. And being in Europe made me personally maybe exchange a lot with very big international communities. And although Lebanon is a very tiny, small country, but the intensity of the exchanges you live here in Lebanon is incomparable. You don't live it elsewhere.
Yeah.
So this hub, yes, it's maybe a lot of emotions. It's not very, how do you say, tangible,
yeah.
But it's something in the air.
Yeah.
So how to translate this something in the air, this feeling, to a brand, to a message, to a credo, and I think you are the gurus.
Well, I don't know about that.
We count on you.
Joachim, interestingly, I think there's in the UK we have a prime minister who tells his government ministers, you do this and you do this and you do this. So that was relatively easy to do the great campaign. In Sweden, you have a different structure. Could you say a little bit about how you got the different ministries and those in the public sector to engage with and support the project that you were running?
Sure. It's quite interesting because the first Brand Sweden platform was developed, I think it started in 2003. And it started with Sweden.se. So we created a digital country portal on the net. And when we did that, we realized we had to have some strategy for what we were going to communicate through this portal. And that was what actually started it. So it was kind of a from the bottom up initiative from the people working with the Sweden.se that suggested that since we're going to develop a strategy or platform for this, can it be used for a broader purpose? And we never got the prime minister involved really, but it was more of a situation that we, the people that understood branding and worked with that and worked with research and saw how Sweden was perceived abroad, we took the initiative, and we got an okay from the foreign minister, but the foreign minister was not involved in the process per se, and for us that was a good thing. So we had the people that understood this process and the how you do those things, doing the work, but with a blessing from the politicians.
And I think we talked about this morning over breakfast, and it's this idea that there should be a champion who isn't necessarily in government leading this and driving this, but it has to be a team here. It can't be wheeling in Saatchi and Saatchi or someone, however great they may be. It can't be bringing in the international agency to work it and to run it. It needs to be Lebanese people running it and owning it and driving it and communicating and working with the public sector. Tim, you've worked in Asia and Africa and Europe and America and the Middle East. Are audiences the same or different?
That's a great question, Alex. I think they're the same and they're different, actually. And I suspect that they're becoming more the same than different. And I think that's driven by globalization, by social media, by the internet. However, clearly national identities remain preeminent and national characteristics. So I think you need to be successful as a marketer, and this is about a marketing exercise, I guess. You really need to get the insight, the key insight from either it's a product, a brand, a company, a country, and then really understand that. And that comes back to the point about research. So I can't stress enough the importance of doing the right sort of research with the right audiences that really give you the right sort of insights. And I had the pleasure of working for the Coca-Cola company for 15 years, and that included in the Middle East, that included in Lebanon, although clearly Coke doesn't do so well against Pepsi in Lebanon, but that's by the by. But one of the mantras we lived by at Coke was you need to delight your consumer. So every day there was a thing about, how are you delighting your consumer today? And I think that sort of thinking needs to play through into this exercise. And I was delighted actually when I took the MEA flight up from Dubai yesterday, and I was watching the in-flight, and I'm sure we've all sat there and watched in-flights, or rather not watched them. But the in-flight instructions at the beginning of the flight yesterday absolutely delighted me. I think it's one of the best examples of an in-flight using national characteristics, national stories, in a slightly quirky way. So next time you're on an MEA flight, take a look at that, because that sort of thinking and the way that played through really struck a chord with me, and it showed that someone was thinking differently. Because the competition that exists in terms of national brands and city brands, which I think is probably part of the new genre, but it is incredibly competitive, and part of that is driven by emerging economies. So China and emerging economies in Latin America are all beginning to get on the national brand bandwagon for the reasons that Alex outlined in his introduction, because they recognize the benefits of FDI, they recognize the quick revenue growth around tourism, they recognize the internal dynamic and how important it is to give the idea of a national entity and the things that gives to local populations. So what I'm saying is that it's a very competitive space. So coming back to the insight, it's only through detailed understanding of your target market and of your own origins, if you like, that allow those two things to come together to create the to apply the right creative, and the creative can be whatever you want it to be ultimately.
Great. I'll do one more question to Mike, then I'd love to open up to the floor. But Mike, as a high-standing member of Her Majesty's Diplomatic Service, you're a master at ensuring that the UK treads carefully around the world. And I think we need to be careful. We need to bear in mind our trading partners, our regional partners. So when we go out and we start to talk about things as Lebanon more loudly than we have, what advice can you give Lebanon in terms of diplomacy and not treading too heavily and not upsetting our neighbours?
Well, I think it's about developing a strategy that is tailored to the countries that Lebanon regards as most important for its prosperity, future security and competitiveness. So obviously Lebanon already has a network of embassies across the world. There are good reasons why there are Lebanese embassies in particular capitals like Washington, London, Paris, Delhi, Tokyo. It's working out what are the sectors in those countries that are most relevant to matching up to Lebanese strengths. So how do we properly highlight the best about Lebanon through a new and refreshed brand that will give Lebanese business the best chance of succeeding? And I think there is a way of doing that through a unified trade and investment strategy. The message could well be similar across the globe, but it could be tailored for particular markets to meet the needs of that particular audience. And that's what the UK has tried to do on particular sectors. For example, in India, where there is an enormous thirst for knowledge in higher education and in research, we've often tried to develop research and innovation partnerships. There are fantastic technology companies in India with great human capital, but they don't necessarily have the ecosystem to be able to become commercially viable. But bringing in either UK capital or some expertise that will align with Indian intellectual property to make that a more compelling, successful company is something that we've worked hard at. And there are undoubtedly companies in Lebanon where, with the right partner in some of the countries that Lebanon is represented in, will make those companies even more successful. It will enhance their exports and in goods and services, and will probably lead to greater foreign direct investment coming back into the country. So it is really about understanding the strengths of your country and properly portraying them in an attractive packaged message and brand to that country. And the embassies have a critical role in that, but they can only do that if they know they have the support not just of their foreign ministry here in Beirut, but all of the ministries that are mentioned in the collective effort, and several were represented this morning. So it could be industry, culture, tourism, economy and trade. It could be the Investment Development Authority of Lebanon, and it's certainly all of the stakeholders among business, whether they are trade associations like the Lebanese Franchise Association, chambers of commerce, other stakeholders that can perhaps be consulted and help define the message so that it is articulated in a way that it gives the greatest chance of success.
Thank you, Mike. I wonder if there are any questions from the floor. If not, oh yes, we have do we have a microphone possibly for the gentleman in the front? No, do we have a microphone?
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Thank you for the presentation. The question that I have is regarding a recent project that the Lebanese government has embarked on.
Sorry, would you mind speaking up a little? I don't think we can hear you.
Oh. It's regarding a project that the Lebanese government has embarked on via the Ministry of Tourism regarding religious tourism in Lebanon. Now, I don't know how many people are aware, but we have hundreds of religious sites in Lebanon representing various sects that are extremely interesting. So my question is, how would you advise this particular project to succeed?
The existing project or the overall Brand Lebanon project?
No, this to include this religious tourism project within the overall Brand Lebanon.
Shall I answer that, Marianne?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do is create the idea of a platform and a message that can enhance and work with every single existing piece of work and activity. So we're not trying to say you should do this or this is the way it should look. We're trying to provide everybody with a louder voice. So I think any initiatives that are currently going on, which yours sounds like a great initiative, and I think it's a very valid one, and it fits into culture and it fits into heritage, and obviously there are very modern elements to that and contemporary elements to it. I think the idea would be to work with you and the existing campaign to help you grow your campaign, ideally by making that campaign a pillar, as I outlined earlier, of the overall activity. So the idea is to make it more powerful for you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Any more questions?
Hi. You described two different methodologies, let's say, to brand a country. One that goes through the public, the government, the prime minister office, and one that went through a portal and then developed to which, if you look at your experience in Lebanon so far, we met once in the LFA, and for you, what would be the best approach for Lebanon? And I would like to hear as well, Madam Mayor.
Do you think maybe Joachim could answer that question?
Yeah.
With something that would be interesting?
Well, if I understand it correctly, the best way to do this,
the best approach to start this process.
Yeah. I think it's essential to have as high leaders as possible to sanction the project. So if you have the Prime Minister and President and you have the highest leaders supporting it, that is very important. But I think it's not very good if they are involved in it and try to control it. So if you can get a situation where you have the highest leaders and political leaders especially, but I think also within industry and business to support it, but then you have professionals that understand the branding and maybe it's easier for the people lower down in the hierarchy working with it day to day to understand the inside out perspective, to do the research and understand how the rest of the world sees a country, to do that actual work. And I think it's very important that the process and the content doesn't get politicized. So it's because then it won't survive an election. And in Sweden, in the case of Sweden, we developed the original brand platform was developed under a socialist democratic government, and it was launched under a right-wing government. So that was, I think, we knew that we had done something that was, could be sustained when we launched it.
Maria, we talked about this earlier, so you're...
Sorry, the audio is very hard, so I'm not sure I understood every word. So correct me if I answer aside. We will do it the sandwich way, up, bottom, and bottom up. We are a very small society. It's 4 million. It's like a big city in a big country. It has its hard times being such a small country, but it can be a benefit. So what I will try to do is to make sure that this project involves each. It's easy to do. It's doable if the will is there. To involve each party, we can do it public sector, private sector, and what we call civil society. We can do it both ways to be more effective and more quick. Because we are a small country, this is something we can benefit. There's not much layers between the Lebanese population and the head of state. Yeah. It's very quick.
And I think just to add to Joachim,
did I understand well the question?
Yeah, perfect. My
did my answer please you?
Yeah, of course.
Good.
And I think just to add to Joachim's thing, when we did GREAT, we insisted on cross-party support. And we insisted that it absolutely wasn't a political thing. So even though we've had obviously change of leadership in the UK, it's still used, but it's used because it's so effective and because the nation owns it. And that's the really, really important part of it. And I spent a lot of time getting the royal family involved and supporting it. Because again, that was important because that handed it back. Strangely, the royal family are more about the people than probably the politicians are. So if the royal family were involved in it, then that sort of made the people want to get engaged with it even more than they were.
Alex, can I just say one word about that, which is that if the system in Lebanon wants to try and do something differently, then it will require some very senior leadership, because traditionally there are ways of doing things from a government perspective, in particular ministries which are used to working in silos, because their raison d'etre is to succeed for their individual particular ministry. That certainly was true of the Foreign Office in the UK. If you're trying to do something as big and bold as this, it will need somebody to bring the collective groups together and say, we must change. Whether that is taking budgets from other ministries and rolling them into one bigger one, whether it is the Office of the President or the Prime Minister or both saying, this is how we want it to be done, it will require, I think, that sort of vision and leadership at the outset to make things happen for the collective effort to be delivered.
Yeah. Maybe one more question from the audience, and then we'll wrap up. I mean, Maria, just very quickly, what would be your final message about Brand Lebanon? What would be your final thought of? Is it? I mean, I think this is an incredibly positive initiative with great foundations and huge opportunity. What would you say as your final, very short sort of sound bite? Or
let's do it. We Lebanese, we talk a lot. We must do, and now we have the chance to have a political situation when that can help us, and let's start doing it. We can do it.
Great. And any of you guys, just very, very briefly, final thought on what Lebanon should do next?
Well, I think what you said is very important, because the biggest problem is not to know what to do, it's to dare to do it.
Yeah.
So courage, boldness is most important, and if you really decided to do it, then that's a great sign.
Brilliant. Tim?
I would say organisation, so organise the effort, and organise the effort, and I think that was your point, so about how you organise. I think that's critical. And then consistency, so make sure you keep on going. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
And I would say, look, no country is perfect. There are always things that can hold us back, but Lebanon has all of the ingredients in place to make a fantastic impact on a refreshed Brand Lebanon strategy.
Great. Thank you, panelists. It's really good. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. شكرا للجميع. بدنا ناخذ صورة تذكارية, please. For the picture here.
To take a picture.
Okay, right.
اطلب من الحضور انه يضلوا باماكنهم, لانه رح نبلش البانل الثاني كمان. اذا بتريدوا, اللي بحب يحضر يضل بمحله.
Welcome to Bifex 2017. In our second panel, we will be discussing the global economic trends and how they may affect Lebanon and the Arab region.
إذا مرة جديدة أهلا وسهلا فيكم ومنبلش بتاني بانل. تاني بانل بدي سأدعو تباعا إلى المنصة الأستاذ سعد الأزهري يلي هو تشيرمان جنرال مانجر لبلوم بانك. مستر كارستن بيك. مستر ألان أونيل. أهلا وسهلا فيكم والكلمة الأولى للأستاذ سعد أزهري.
And welcome to panel 2 on global economic trends. And before I present a few opening remarks on the subject of this panel, I would like to thank the Lebanese Franchise Association and its president, Mr. Shah Arbid, on this excellent and timely conference. And thank the panelists for being with us today. And they are this distinguished pair, Mr. Karsten Beck, Director of the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies, a globally renowned futurist, and Mr. Alan O'Neill, Managing Director, CARA Change Management, an internationally recognized business speaker and management consultant. My background is in banking, finance, and economics, so I will restrict my comments to these areas and leave it to our panelists to discuss ideas on strategic megatrends and retail-inspired change. I will do that by focusing first on global economic trends, then on regional trends, and lastly, on the Lebanese ones. In case of global economic trends, I think it's important to take a longer-term view that looks beyond the short-term ups and downs of the economic and political cycle. And to the extent that events such as the election of President Trump and Brexit point to deeper structural shifts, such as the backlash against globalization, immigration, and the rise of inequality, they present short-term, medium-term challenges for policymakers to boost education and training and to address unfairness through well-targeted fiscal policies. But most likely, they will not affect the long-term trajectory as determined by fundamentals like demographics and technology. So of the four long-term global economic trends that I will identify, the first is the shift of global growth. Emerging economies will account for 50% of world GDP in about 10 years and are already growing at twice the rate of developed economies. This will open up great opportunities for businesses prepared to make long-term investment in these markets. But that does not mean that businesses should give up on developed economies. Of the expected 14 trillion growth in consumption in the next 10 years, 40% will come from developed countries where the majority of global upper middle class lives. The second of these trends is new waves of technological innovations. We are already witnessing innovations that will change the way we live, work, and play, spurring new generations of entrepreneurial startups that bring new products and services to the market. They also result in an ever-increasing flood of information, opening up entirely new areas of activity for companies. These new innovations are bound to show up in markedly enhanced world productivity, especially as they gain more momentum and spread. The third of these global trends is that we are moving towards smarter, healthier populations. Better education and health are increasingly making human capital as the engine for powerful long-term growth. In this respect, emerging markets are still lagging in terms of their people's health and education, creating potential constraints to growth, but also opportunities to fill the gap. As interesting are the demographic development between developed and developing countries, combining the aging societies of the former with the younger societies of the latter. and all the business and financial opportunities to serve these two asymmetric markets. The fourth and the last trend is the intensifying competition for finite resources. Economic growth and expanded prosperity will set off a scramble for basic food, water, energy, and industrial commodities, stimulating supply but also igniting geopolitical instability. Businesses should continue to invest in scenario planning to prepare for such potential shocks, but more importantly, and with the help of advancing technologies, they should develop strategies that aim at the gradual decoupling of economic growth from intensive resource consumption so as to ensure the sustainability of the entire economies and perhaps the planet. Moving briefly to the economic trends in the region, it is apparent that unlike at the global level, one can't but be absorbed by the short-term challenges facing the Middle East. Political instability, economic slowdown, and the oil price cycle have all left their wounds on the regional economies. In this sense, finding political solutions to the increasing conflicts will be a prerequisite to economic and social development. As to long-term economic trends, the first that we can ascribe to the region is population growth. This has led to a youth bulge, where over 40% of the population is under 25 years. While this factor has contributed to instability by straining resources and causing youth unemployment estimated at 28%, it can, however, be considered under better circumstances as agent for prosperity through larger markets and a younger labor force. The second long-term trend is rapid urbanization. This has put pressure on climate change and resource scarcity, especially water, whose use is expected to increase by a third in 10 years, and in the process has hindered economic development. But again, it represents an opportunity or the need to develop infrastructure projects estimated to be worth $4 trillion that can be important driver for sustained inclusive growth. The third trend is largely a positive one, and it is a shift in global economic power that raised the strategic location of the Middle East among developed Europe, resurgent Asia, and growing Africa. The benefit from exploiting this position could be tremendous. But even here, the region can take advantage of this strategic position if it has not polished up its economic potential as a stable destination for investment and secure hub for trade flows. Concerning Lebanese economic trends, they are parallel to the regional ones, except that short-term political instability seems to have been notably reduced in Lebanon. The country remains in dire need of an infrastructure overhaul and suffers from serious youth unemployment and brain drain. But its economic prospects could be good and could signal positive trends. These are underpinned by promising developments in the oil and gas sector, by nascent growth in the IT sector driven by BDL Directive 331 initiative, and by a significant potential upturn in export of goods and services, including tourism and exports, to aid in the future rebuilding of Syria. Moreover, these sectoral economic trends would alleviate chronic imbalances in the current account and the fiscal budget, which could restore them onto sustainable, manageable path. Lastly, Lebanon's financial sector, as reflected in its buoyant banking system, has always been in better shape than its real sector. So if these potential economic trends and their implications were to fully materialize, then long-range real sector reforms, such as establishing better governance in public institutions, enhancing the environment for greater entrepreneurship, and of course maintaining durable political stability, are perhaps more needed than ever before. These reforms are necessary and sufficient if the country were to overcome its loss of competitiveness and agility, and finally put behind it the wasteful cycle of political conflict and economic stagnation. I will stop here and give the floor to our participant First will be Mr. Beck talking about towards 2025 strategic megatrends. Then it will be Mr. O'Neill discussing driving change, retail-inspired thinking, and strategies. This will be followed by question and answer and audience participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Azari, and thank you, the organizers of Bifex 2017. My name is Carsten Beck, and I'm director at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. It is my first time in Lebanon, certainly not the last, but thank you so much for having us here today. Mr. Azari was kind enough to tell us a little bit about megatrends as well, and I am happy to say that even though we did not coordinate our speeches today, we are absolutely agreeing with Mr. Azari on the main points regarding the 4 major megatrends. In my presentation, I will try to expand and elaborate a little bit on some of these points. I will tell you a little bit about how we at CIFS see markets and economic trends evolving towards 2025, and also a little bit about the mindset regarding the future. How should you actually, as a company or as a country, work with future trends? So that's basically the agenda for the next half an hour plus 5 minutes. As I said, Carsten Beck, working at CIFS, think tank based in Copenhagen, Denmark, founded by Mr. Torkild Christensen back in 1970. Working with the future from an interdisciplinary perspective. So we work basically with all megatrends, not only economy or digitalization, and working across the globe in all the red countries you can see on the map. Our background for working with future trends, of course, would be our clients, and I will not go into a lot of boring details, but just like to share with you that what we see right now here in 2017 is actually a lot of very, very different and opposing perspectives on the future. We actually have, when we talk to our clients, we have a lot of companies, and unfortunately also a lot of countries, that perceive the future as a very negative space right now, as a place of struggle, as a place of increased competition, and maybe even as a place where the threats are so big, so we are talking outright survival for companies. That could be Flow TV, media companies, some financial institutions, some countries as well. And then we have the polar opposite. Our friends in Google, for example, where they actually, right now, maybe a little bit like you will do here in Lebanon with the great campaign I learned about this morning, they see the future as a space of possibilities, of opportunities. And I mean, when we go to Google and talk, normally futurists like us, we're sort of perceived as the crazy guys. We have weird and wacky ideas, and we ask stupid and silly questions, and we try to challenge concepts. When we talk to Google, we are the conservative ones. We are the boring ones. We are the ones saying, nah, it will not happen that fast. You should probably slow it down a little bit and think about people and other ways of looking at markets and trends. But the key point is, it is a little bit about mindsets at the moment. I will show you some segmentation studies that we have been doing regarding this perspective on the future. So my first key point is actually, we all need to decide. All the great companies that are here in the room today, the great state of Lebanon, are we on the defense or are we on the sort of offensive path and strategic thinking when it comes to the future? And obviously, when we talk about the future, most people will probably say, oh, but we are not defensive here. We are really looking forward to challenging the future and to come up with new great campaigns and strategies, etc., etc. But in reality, the picture is a little bit more mixed. So question to you, What is your mindset regarding the future? Then, when we look at the mega trends, we actually see a lot of trends at the moment. And to be honest, when we look at our client base here, the last couple of years, the big mega trend has been digitalization. We have to say that is sort of the big question that we are asked by companies and countries throughout the world. And digitalization will challenge business models. It will change the way we live. We heard about it in the introduction here today. It will challenge how we organize work, and it will probably even challenge what it means to be a society. And right now, the reason we get all these questions about digitalization is very simply because it's brand new. It is brand new. These devices, the smartphones of the world, they're 10 years old, more or less. So if we haven't really figured out how to use digital tools and processes throughout society and throughout organizations, it's not such a big mystery, because we are still at sort of the baby phase of digitalization. We need to learn, and we need to experiment. And we will probably see the next 5 to 10 years as one big phase of experimentation when it comes to this mind at the moment. A third point would actually be the increasing pace of change. That is almost like a cliche to say that. But we actually, when we look at markets today, we do see that the pace in markets, the pace in society, the pace that people experience their life, it is increasing. We see more changes per year and more changes even per minute. Just to give you one survey about the accelerating pace of change. This survey was published last summer. It is from Boston Consulting Group, one of the big consultancy firms in the world. And normally, I have to say, Boston Consulting Group, they are not well known for their sense of humor. But they published this. And we kind of like it as ifs, this study, because what they did was they actually took the average human lifespan. So how long can an average human being on the planet Earth, how long can we expect to live? And then they plotted that track, and it's the green one, the green curve you can see, from 55 and almost until today. And then they tracked the orange one, as you can see, and that is the average lifespan of companies. Not all companies, only publicly listed companies in the States, but I think we could expand that in a more broader sense and say it will probably go for the rest of the world as well. And as you can see, a few up and downs, absolutely, but the conclusion it's quite clear. Companies are not surviving the way they used to do. Companies, the average lifespan is actually decreasing. And that is one of the big challenges. And that is actually why we have so many defensive clients at the moment at TIFS, because we are looking at this trend. And we are seeing that it is actually going down. When we talk to big companies about the conclusions and the learnings of studies like this, there's a lot of head shaking, and there's a lot of anxiety in the room, and how can we survive, and all of that, and we need a resilient strategy to escape this awful fate. But I wouldn't say funny, but the interesting thing is actually, now we heard about all the young people of Lebanon and this region. When you show this study to young people, educated young people, and you ask them, well, when you look at this, the green one is okay, that's very good. The orange one, is that a problem for you? Then young people, they tend to say, no, not really. Why would we need organizations to survive? We can have a prosperous future, and we can have a great career, and whatever we need to do to live a fulfilled life in the future. And do we really need big companies for that? So my third question, I think it is to you, is all you representing great big companies here today in this room, how can you attract young, talented people that have this mindset, that don't care about survival, don't care about the old organizations, but are interested in all the new stuff? So another question to you guys. Sorry, that was one too many. That's very green. Here we go. So what we are basically seeing, if you just sum all of this up in the beginning, is actually that we see a movement with the global trends going from the left towards the right in this slide. We are going from a world where we were able to make forecasts, where we were able to say, but it's a physical world, and scalability and global solutions, they are tricky to combine, and they will cost you a lot of money and time and investment. And basically we were saying, when we looked at markets, we had this sort of bell-shaped curve where almost everybody was sort of in a middle position, and then you had some outliers, front runners, and then you have a few people that were a little bit backwards, but basically bell-shaped curves. And now we say it's accelerating pace of change. So we need to look into innovation. We need to rethink. We need to create the strategies that you talked about, sir. It is going to be a more volatile world, and it is going to be a world where we will have an increasing amount of uncertainty about markets, about politics, about global economic trends. Complexity and probably also this ambiguous mindset that the future is difficult to describe in a few sentences. It was easier back then. But if you ask me, and if you ask my institute, okay, then let's take just one trend, the digitalization of pretty much everything in the world. What will society look like when we are truly digitalized, if we ever get to that? Well, to be honest, we don't know. We have scenarios for that, and we have scenarios for specific sectors and specific industries, but all of society, we don't know. So the need to operate with scenarios and wildcard thinking is going to be more important. And we have written a number of fantastic reports about that. I won't bore you with the details in reports like this. Just showing you this slide, that was actually my insight from the beginning of this presentation, that it is about mindsets. It is about mindsets. We do not work for Amazon, we work for Google, as I said, but my mind boggles a little bit when you read statements like this from Mr. Jeff Bezos from Amazon. Our goal is to supply everything needed to rebuild civilization. All the challenges and trends you talked about, sir, Mr. Jeff Bezos, he is trying to rebuild civilization in order for all of us to have a future. Will he succeed? I don't know. I have no clue. Maybe he will make a spectacular failure, but just maybe there will be scenarios where he will succeed. I can tell you, I did a small workshop in Denmark for a medium-sized company in Denmark. And Denmark is a very small country, so medium-sized companies are not very big. And one of the scenarios we actually did for this workshop was to say, why don't we just give Amazon a call and say, you can have Denmark. If we can be part of your supply chain, you can have Denmark. And Denmark, I mean, we don't figure on the radar of Amazon. We are 5.5 million people. So we don't figure on the radar of Amazon. But that's the questions we are starting to ask ourselves at the moment. And once again, it is about mindset. Next one, let's see if we can get this to work. Basically, one more time, talking about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity as sort of the key drivers when it comes to global trend analysis. And then we would also say, here in 2017, that I don't know about you here in the audience today, But we at SIFS, when we look at the last 20 months, my God, there's been a lot of surprises. There's been a lot of surprises. There's been a lot of instances where the scenarios that we have been created together with our client base have been challenged by real life event occurring faster than we actually envisioned. We've heard about this gentleman today. He's on pretty much every conference around the globe for the last 5 months. This is the best graffiti we have in Copenhagen at the moment. Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump. We're politically neutral. We don't have an opinion at SIFS about his politics. Could be good, it could be bad. We don't care. We just describe the future as we see it. But what we do see is actually a macro-political and economic discussion globally, where all the institutions and all the thinking and all sort of the logic that we have built up over the last 4 to 5 generations from the Second World War and until today, more or less, they are being challenged. They are being challenged. Will he succeed? Will we really have to create new institutions? We don't know, but we need to prepare. We need to look at global supply chains and say, okay, 5 years ago, or maybe even 2 years ago, it was fantastic to be a global brand, and it was the obvious strategy for a lot of companies and a lot of countries. What happens if globalization is not the trick of the trade in the next 10 years? What happens if we are actually turning towards a more regionalized world, or maybe even a more nationalistic world? What kind of campaign do we then need here in Lebanon or in any other country in order to succeed? So once again, we need scenarios. We need scenarios. Then let me just go from the macro perspective and towards the micro perspective just for 10 minutes, and then we'll flip back into the macro thinking and then round off and then give the word to Alan. But just a few words on consumers, as we are a lot of retailers in the room as well here today. So when we look at consumers, our way of thinking is actually a little bit inspired by Warner Brothers back in 1927, which is really, really a long time ago. 1927, we actually had the premiere of the first talkie. We had the premiere of The Jazz Singer, it was called. It was a film of 90 minutes, as all films, and you could actually hear actors talk. You could hear actors talk. That is a very, very good idea, to be able to hear actors talk. It opened up so many new possibilities for entertainment and the entertainment industry. And looking back 100 years later, I guess we all would agree now here in this day and age, well, pretty good idea, let's go with that. But what actually happened back in 1927? Well, we have this quote, as you can see here, and I'm sorry about the language, but one of the Warner Brothers actually looked at this new phenomena and said, who the hell wants to hear actors talk? So looking at a phenomena, looking at trends in society, and once again, it is about this mindset saying, we don't like it. We are on the defense. We don't think this is a great and prosperous future for our industry and our company. So once again, it is about mindsets. And when we talk to consumers, when we talk to citizens across the globe, no matter in which part of the world we look, we always meet people that want more. I know it's so basic, and it's so simple to say up here on stage. But in real life, to actually think about what does that mean for Lebanon? What does that mean for the great brands in the room here today? That is actually quite tricky. And I have to say, we'll still see at SIFS a lot of arms going like this a little bit crossed and a little bit skeptical, and companies that don't really want to listen to the scenarios and the trends. Then on the other hand, one of the key things we've been talking about the last 5 to 10 years is of course to collaborate with consumers and to go out and sort of co-create the future. And we also heard from the esteemed panel just this morning that bottom-up solution is fantastic, and we certainly agree to that at SIFS. But we are also in agreement with this old quote that I guess most of you know. It's one of the more famous one doing the rounds, Mr. Henry Ford, who said also 100 years ago, if I asked people what they wanted, I would have made a faster horse. So actually having a bottom-up approach is good. But having a bottom-up approach where you believe that the audience or the consumer or the citizen can actually sort of co-invent the future together with you, or maybe even invent the future on their own, that's tricky. And most people, they have great difficulties doing that. So we actually, we have, as I said in the beginning, we have some segmentation studies. I'll just show you one slide regarding the segmentation of people. And it's about how citizens perceive the future. And what we see right now in Europe, at least I don't have numbers for Lebanon, I'm sorry, but what we see in Europe, and I would imagine you can see some of the same insights here in the Middle East, but we see 3 segments. We see a segment of people that basically are oriented towards the past. So these citizens or consumers, whatever we choose to call them, we're talking about people basically. When you ask them about the future, they will say, this is not going to be good. This is going to be a bad conversation, because the future is something unknown. It is something I cannot trust. It is something where my sense of security and safety will be challenged. So basically, just by you, whether you are a brand or a country or a campaign, just the mentioning of the word future will scare me. So if you want to get these people on board, whatever you do, you need to make them feel safe and secure. You need to assure them that whatever kind of good thing they have seen and experienced in the past, we can take this good thing and project it into the future thanks to your brand or your campaign. So that is sort of the future, the people that are oriented towards the past. Then we have a second segment, and that is citizens or consumers that have an orientation towards the present. And then we have a third one down here just in 2 minutes, and you can probably guess what they're called. But citizens oriented towards the present, they don't care about the past, and they don't care about the future. They care about right here, right now. Whatever you do, whatever your company is providing them of products and services, if it's good and it's convenient and it's funny, entertaining, whatever is in your brand, they will be happy and they will go with you. And if you come to this segment and say, oh, but let's discuss the future, then as I said before, the first segment, they will say, no, we don't want that. We are scared about the future. The second segment will say, yeah, we can discuss the future. What did you have in mind? How can you help me in the future? So they're thinking, as I've written here on this slide, a little bit sort of plus minus 5%. So if the future is 5% better, fine, let's have it. It's good. And if it's 5% worse, well, sometimes things happen, and we'll still tag along with you because you are an exciting brand or whatever have we. And then we have the third segment. And the third segment, obviously, we need to click here. They are oriented towards the future. They look at the future and the campaigns and the brand promises and all the great things that could happen, and they would love to participate. And they would love to be together with the Lebanon campaign or your brands and co-create the future. They have a number of ideas, and they will pop up there over on the Twitter feed, and they just can't wait to get to the future. So, these are the 3 segments. And if you have a campaign or if you have a political discussion, as we have in Europe right now about the European Union, you need to address all 3 segments. And what we see in Europe at the moment is that over the last decade, we have in Europe gone from a situation where most of us was in the middle, a little bit boring. Sort of, okay, if it's working right now, it's fine. The future, I don't really care, but I'm not scared about it. So most Europeans tended to be in the middle. But now, here in 2017, we have more people in the top saying the future, it's a scary place. I don't want to go there. And we have, at the same time, more people at the bottom saying the future is a fantastic place, and I would love to be part of that. So that is my insight number 5 or 6, I'm not really sure. If you want to attract the attention of a broad market, of a broad base, whether it's for political reasons, it is for commercial reasons, you need to think about your position. How can you make a strategy that is resilient, meaning that you both attract the frightened people and the people that are ready to rock, So that is another question I will pose to you. Then here at the end of my presentation, just a few words on the megatrends and just 1 or 2 slides on economy. I think we had a very good introduction to the global economic picture, and as I said, we are aligned, so no need to go into detail there. This is sort of the basic megatrend deck that we use at CIFS at the moment when we talk about the future markets and future societies. Of course, this is very basic and it's very generic. It will go in pretty much all countries and in all regions in all parts of the world. So added to that, you need to look into local and national trends. You need to look into transactional and market trends to get sort of the full trend picture. But as you can see, we are saying, and as I said now for the 4th time, we are in total agreement. We talk about demographic development, the young people in parts of the world, the old people in other parts of the world. We talk about an economic growth perspective that has very much to do with the rise of Asia and trouble in more mature parts of the world. I'll just talk a little bit more about that. Then globalization, we still believe that the world is globalizing, but we urge you to create scenarios in your companies and here in Lebanon addressing a more regional and a more nationalistic future as well. Commercialization, commercial solutions, it's the market that basically are ruling. That's fair and square. Sustainability, we heard about the emerging water crisis. We might need to address climate change, all of these issues. Individual solutions for individual citizens and consumers, also very much a megatrend. Networks, social media, I'm certainly not an expert there, but of course all the new business models and concepts popping up in that part of the world, so to speak. Democratization, meaning that citizens and consumers would like to gain access. So we're not talking about political systems, but we are talking about the curiosity of consumers and the curiosity of citizens. So if you're hiding information, if you're hiding parts of the journey you want to take the customer on in the future, be more open, be more accessible. That's basically what it says there. Health, we heard about that as well. Polarization of the world, we saw that with how people perceive the future. We also have economic issues with winners and losers at the moment. Branding and immaterialization of markets, certainly a big trend. You will talk more about that tomorrow. Education, we heard about that as well. Knowledge will be more important. Technology at large, obviously the big driver. And finally, acceleration and complexity, as we talked about in the beginning of this presentation. I will skip that one. Just 3 more slides. 4 actually. From a European perspective, most of our clients are still in Europe. We are working on it, but still in Europe. Of course, from a European perspective, it is about the future of the European Union, and I think pretty much everybody is in doubt at the moment. This is a very crucial year. There will be a lot of elections, and we need a new story. We need a new, we need a new European brand. So you guys in the panel up there before, when you've made a great campaign for Lebanon, you need to come back to Europe and make a great campaign for Europe, because we are confused at the moment. What is Europe? We don't know. Welfare states are not in trouble, but we are questioning welfare states in parts of Europe, how we can proceed with that. Migration and internal mobility is obviously a big and important question at the moment. And then private sector competitiveness and economic globalization. What will it actually have to take for European companies to survive in this more globalized future? So that will actually sum up sort of the 5 key areas where we focus in Europe towards 2025. And then finally, 2 slides on economy, and then I'll leave the floor to the next speaker. First of all, just to remember sort of the, how can you put it, the scope of economic growth. If you look back the last 20 years on the global economic growth and you try to divide it into regions, you have this picture. You have this picture. And as you can see, ups and downs, and of course we had the crisis in 2008 and 9. It's all there to see. And now we are in 2016. And, well, it's pretty obvious. If we want growth, and we do, and if we want to attack markets where growth is happening, as you can see, it is still about China. And I'm not, also here, not an expert in Chinese matters, but as you can see, when we look at it from a global perspective, if China is going to be in trouble, and we don't know, but if we have a bubble appearing in the Chinese economy due to debt levels, then pretty much all of the global growth perspectives disappear. And we need new areas, new geographical areas of growth. Middle East, Africa, South Asia, Latin America. But the challenge is immense. It is huge. We do not see at the moment anyone being able to replace China when it comes to growth. We would love to, because we need growth. We lack growth in the future as we see it at CIFSA in 2017. But China really, really needs to stay the course. Otherwise, we are in big and dire straits, all of us. So that was one point. And the second point, on a long-term basis, and that is, I'm sorry, it's a little bit negative, but nonetheless, I feel it's a very important message. The long-term perspective when it comes to growth has to do with productivity levels. Of course, there's a demand side to the economy, and that is important as well, but that can be adjusted with monetary and fiscal policies, even though we are not very good at it at the moment. But the long-term growth perspective is 100% related to and correlated with productivity growth. And as more and more of the global economy is looking more and more like the mature economies of the world, in the next couple of decades, we will face the same challenge. How can we increase productivity in a world where the service sector dominates the global economy? We have been, over the past 200 years, champions in getting productivity in industry and in agriculture. And we should continue down that path, absolutely, no doubt about it. But as 50, 60, 70, 80% of economic activity in the future will take place in the service sector, then that's where we need to look. And if you look at some of the big countries in the world, not all of them, but just some of them, and if you look at productivity growth back from the 60s and until today, I think we can see the same picture, all of us. It is becoming increasingly difficult to keep up productivity growth. So that will be the key question when we meet here in Lebanon, in Beirut, in 20 years' time, and we examine all the forecasts that we have been giving you here today. How did we cope on a global scale with the crisis in productivity? And that has to do with the service sector, including retail. So that would be the seventh insight and question from me to you. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a glorious future.
Thank you. Yes. Now we will hear from Mr. Alan O'Neill, Managing Director, Carrot Change Management, an internationally recognized business speaker and management consultant. He will be discussing driving change, retail-inspired thinking, and strategies.
Thank you, Sam. Good afternoon. Okay, I know it's nearly lunchtime, folks, so we're just bear with us for another short while. We lock the doors, we won't let you out. So I'm going to talk to you some more. We've got lots of speakers over the 2 days who will be telling us a lot about research and the trends. I'm going to talk directly to you in a more commercial context to see how we can put some of this change into practice. So change management, can I get the slides there actually, please? We got a set of slides? Thank you. Okay, so first of all, change management. It was very interesting. I was at a party recently and this guy came over to me and he said with a big smile on his face, "So what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm in the business of change management." His shoulders dropped, his face fell to the floor, and he said, I could just see him saying to himself, "My gosh, my one night out, and I get to stand beside this guy." Look, change management is fairly straightforward. It's about what we do is help organizations transition through change. So whether it's banking, whether it's hospitality, retail, motor industry, my expertise is in helping organizations transition through change. And today I want to talk to you about some of my experiences over the last 25 years in helping organizations through change. So it's not so much about the research itself, it's more about how to transition through change. Can I ask, first of all, how many people in the audience are retailers? Okay. How many people in the audience are in hospitality? Okay, so it's about half and half. Okay, so look, I've got experience in both retail and hospitality, but retail particularly, I'm hugely passionate about retail. I've been very privileged to work with some amazing brands around the world in retail over recent years, from food to fashion, from DIY to mainstream, from luxury to mass, from big box department stores to multiple stores. So I'm not claiming to be an expert in retail, but I do know retail inside out, upside down. I also have experience working with some quite significant franchise retailers, such as you'll have heard of Spar International, for example. And in my country, where I'm from, we have a lot of franchise retailers. You can probably also tell by now that my accent is a little bit different to some of the other accents. I'm very proud to say that I'm from Ireland. Woo, thank you. Actually, the similarities between Ireland and Lebanon are quite extensive. We are also a small country of about 5 million people. We also experienced years of conflict. And we have come out the other side with peace now for the last 20 plus years. And we're very delighted and very happy about that. We also punch above our weight in terms of our presence in the global economy and the global presence. We've got a very strong diaspora. We do punch above our weight. And I think there's some very, very interesting correlations and indeed lessons that we could all both learn from each other. But now, let me move on. So, like I said, lots of speakers over the 2 days will be sharing research and their insights into change and how the world is changing. Like I said, I'm going to position how you cope with change, how you can embrace the change and drive it through your business. But I do want to kind of put in context where all this change is coming from. And I'm going to use these few examples as a way of illustrating that. Take sociological, in other words, people. Well, of course we know that people are changing. There's a very strong health and wellness agenda. There's a declining tobacco agenda. There's also a very strong, we skipped one. There we go. So we also know through trends that there's a very, very strong focus on convenience, that customers want more convenience. Look at airlines, look at Amazon, and this one-click purchase process that Amazon have developed, for example. We also know that customers want more experiences. For example, in my country, and indeed in the UK, where I do a lot of work, retail sales had a difficult Christmas. Retail sales were not where they hoped they would be. And what they're finding is that lots of customers are now shifting their buying patterns to experiences such as eating out and going on holiday rather than just pure retail. We also know that there's a very strong value agenda because of the global crash, and that people had to pull in and tighten their belts for so many years. That value agenda is still lingering on. So the Aldi and Lidl discounter grocery retailers, for example, the German discounters, they have invaded Ireland and they are growing in market share. Now, I believe the discounters will never grow to more than 20% of any market in terms of share, but they are growing. They are growing very strongly because of that value mentality has crept in. They're just examples of the way people are changing. But so also is the economy changing. Look at the currency fluctuations of recent times, low interest rates, low oil prices, going back up now a little bit, I appreciate. But the economic trends and the economic factors that are influencing our customers and our competitors are quite significant. Another driver of change, how often do we have to see this slide coming up? But it's an example of how the world is changing on the political front. And even take that at a different level and look at political in a different way, such as legislation and compliance. Because of the global crash, bankers, their world has changed significantly in terms of compliance. They have to employ lots of extra payroll to actually accommodate all of the legislative changes that they're facing. And another driver of change, of course, and this is the mother of all change drivers, and that's technology. And technology is having such a huge impact on our world. Cloud computing and, of course, mobile also having such a huge impact. And particularly for us retailers, the growth in omni-channel retail selling is significant. It's growing at exponential rate. May not be making very much money yet, but it is growing. And not just omni-channel, but mobile particularly is growing phenomenally. And not only in retail, of course, but also in banking. And we've got to embrace this because it is here to stay. Now, what is happening with all of these change factors, sociological, technological, economical, and political? Well, let me tell you that they're swirling around the world. They're all intermingling and they're impacting each other. And they're creating havoc around the world. They're swooshing down on different industries. And they, like a whirlwind. Like, for example, look at the book industry. Look at the music industry. If you're a retailer of books, if you're a retailer of music, your world has changed significantly because of all of these change drivers. But let's not get too negative. Change is not only negative. I don't want to paint a picture of negativity around change. Because change also brings goodness, it brings greatness, it brings opportunity. But to embrace that opportunity, it means we have to think differently. We've got to embrace it. Because like the previous speaker, Karsten, talked about the ambiguity growing, the speed of change, the volume of change, the ambiguity. We all need different skills. As retailers, as hoteliers, as restaurateurs, we need to have different skills. And one of the skills we've got to prioritize in our toolkit, in addition to great merchandising, in addition to great buying, in addition to great displays and VM, we need to be able to cope with change. We need to prioritize the skill of changing and being able to adapt, recognize what's a priority, what we need to embrace, and what we don't need to embrace. With all of these change factors that are changing the world, don't forget this. Your competitors are changing. Sometimes your competitors can move faster than you. They're changing. Our customers are changing. Our competitors are changing. I was speaking at a conference recently in Frankfurt for Lufthansa. And Lufthansa have a division within their airline called AirPlus. AirPlus is a debit card division, so it's a charge card like American Express. And they've grown every year for 25 years. And I was there, I was invited to speak on change. And of course, I presented my take on change and how to embrace change and how to drive change. And then it came to the Q&A at the end of the session. And one guy asked a question, well, why do we need to change? After all, we've grown every year for 25 years. We've never gone backwards. Why do we need to change? I don't know very much about charge cards, but what I do know is that change is all around us. And my answer was very simple. Your customers are changing. Your competitors are changing. If you think it's okay to be complacent and say, we don't need to change because we're growing, that is the rock that you will perish on. And that is my strong belief. Imagine if you didn't change. Imagine if you didn't embrace the realities of our world. Imagine if you just said, we're doing okay. Well, after all, the economy is growing and we're doing okay. But actually, I challenge you significantly and seriously to not let yourself become complacent. You have to embrace the change. And it's nothing to do with age. It's nothing to do with whether you are same color hair as me or not the same color hair as me. We have to embrace change because the world is changing. If you do not change, one of the key questions you've got to ask yourself is, how relevant are you? Why should your customers buy from you? If they are changing, their expectations are changing, the competitors are changing. How relevant would you be if you didn't change? I'm sure the senior people in Nokia are asking themselves the same question. I'm sure the senior people in BlackBerry are asking themselves the same question. They lost their relevance. They didn't move. They didn't change enough in line with the way everything else was changing. They were not relevant. How relevant are you? Let's just look at some changes in retail specifically for the retailers in the room, but it's not just for retailers. I'm going to give retail examples, but it's not just for retailers because the examples I will give, you will see if you're a hotelier, you will recognize some of the changes here also. If you look back over the last 30 years, before the major technology changes in recent times, the most significant change in retail was changing from pricing gun to barcode. Do you remember? The pricing gun was where you put stickers onto every single item with the price on it. And then barcodes came in. And that was the single biggest disruption in retail that retail had seen for 30 years. And that was in the 70s, late 70s, thereabouts. Look at retail and how it has changed ever since. It is just phenomenal. And I'm not going to go through every item here, but just to give you, this is an example. This is a Price Waterhouse study. And what they did was they looked at how retail has changed, what is changing, and what's coming down the tracks. This slide is about 18 months old, and already it is out of date. For example, just look at omni-channel, which they were saying is something of tomorrow. Guys, it's here right now. Another one, integrated channel is very similar to omni-channel. Mobile point of sale and mobile technology. Personalized service. Also, multi-return points. This is a real big pain in the ass for online retailers because now they've got to be fantastic supply chain experts, not just great retailers, because of click and collect and click and return. They've got to think about their premises now as supply chain destinations. It's just changing all of the time. Here's an example of Burberry in Regent Street in London, and they're quite pioneering in how they're integrating the physical store and the digital online presence and making this experience one that is very, very exciting and engaging when you go into their store. And of course, we know about Apple and their stores, how I don't know if you've been to an Apple store. It's quite amazing that the displays are very simplistic, but actually their salespeople are not trained to sell. They are trained to within an inch of their lives on product knowledge. And they see that when they convey all of the great features and benefits of Apple products to customers, they will just buy. I think that's very, very interesting. It's a risk I wouldn't be prepared to take when I'm talking to my retail clients. I wouldn't dare say to a retail client, don't train your people how to sell. To me, it's quite basic, but there you go. It's working very, very well for Apple. Another change is, if you think about this technology, guys, that we have to accept that with all of this technological change, it is changing faster than we as retailers can cope with. It's very hard to keep up with it. Not only that, you need very deep pockets to be able to keep up with it. You can't have it all. And that, to me, suggests a different thinking. We've got to edit what is out there. We can't have it all. There's a very high user acceptance. And I think I heard Saad mentioning this morning that 40% of the population is under 25. 40% of the Lebanese population under 25. They've all got smartphones. I've just come from Dubai doing some work with Eli Lilly, the pharmaceutical company. My daughter happens to live there, and she has two gorgeous, edible little boys. And the 4-year-old, was just to see him on the iPad and his mother's mobile phone, it's scary, just scary. The high user acceptance is going to impact on you as a retailer if you don't embrace this. They're also always connected, as you know, and mobile particularly is growing in usage. So like I said, there's all this newness out there, and it's almost for you in your retail business, whether you're in, and not just for the IT guys, by the way, not just for the omni-channel guys, but for all of us as merchants. We see all of this newness. It's like going into a sweet shop. We want this, well, you can't have it all. And I would suggest to you that you've just got to edit what's right for your business. But don't just go for the sweets that you happen to like yourself because you've always eaten them. Recognize what will matter to my customers. What will give me a competitive edge? What will make me different? Okay, so look, we've talked a lot about how retail has changed. And guys, I'm not here to try and give you a full overview about how retail has changed. You know that quite well. And there are lots of researchers over the 2 days who will give more insights into consumer behavior, which is fantastic. But let's also go back to basics here and remember what has not changed in retail. What has not changed is a very simple model of footfall multiplied by conversion, multiplied by average spend, gives you your sales. Retail is a numbers game. Now, large organizations have teams of people to try and drive footfall. Large organizations have teams of people to improve conversion, be it with fantastic visual merchandising or having the right product mix, the right price architecture, good, better, and best. They also have great salespeople who will convince a customer to buy. And of course, ATV, the average transaction value. We focus on that. This hasn't gone away. So let's take comfort in this mad, mad, mad world of dynamic, ambiguous, fast-moving, voluminous change, that the basics haven't gone away. And what are the principles that mean that we can drive footfall, improve conversion, and drive ATV? Well, I want to just tell you my passion. I personally am passionate about giving customers a great experience. I don't just look at customers as cash, as many businesses do. When I think of customers, I think about the feelings that a customer has when they are selecting a product and the excitement that they're feeling in the dressing room when they're trying something on for the first time. I can feel the joy that when they go home and they put on that outfit for the first time to go to a dinner party or to go to a function, and how confident they feel. Or maybe if they're buying a gift, I also think about the joy that they feel in giving the gift. That's what I mean by customer experience. If we can get thinking and focusing on customer experience, not just customers as cash. But of course, what do we mean by customer experience? Well, it's a combination. It's a combination of product, having the right product. Now, you guys are good merchants. You know about good, better, and best. You know about getting your price architecture right. You know about supply chain. You know about mix of colors and sizes. That's your trade. But can I also suggest to you that we also need to think about the place? And I don't just mean online, but the standards in store, the standards of retailing, and our people, the impact our people make, and the influence that a person can bring to encouraging a customer to buy something. I see it as a three-legged stool. And whether you're a banker, whether you're a hotelier, whether you're a retailer, the three-legged stool applies for everybody in the room. The three-legged stool is a way of defining your proposition. It works every single time. And let me tell you, for your folks on the front line who are interacting with your customers, if you tell them, and this is what you expect of them, use the three-legged stool as a way of defining your proposition. It's fantastic. It's structured. It's easy for them to understand. Because we all know the concept of a three-legged stool is take one leg away and it falls over. Well, I would put it to you that if any one of those three is missing in your customer's interaction with you, their impression of you, their feelings about you as a service provider have been weakened. Now, the three-legged stool is a very powerful tool. It works in every industry. How can it be that clever? There's something missing. And what's missing is the positioning you have in the marketplace. That determines what good looks like. So let me give you some examples of clients that I've worked with in the last few years. Let's take Harrods, first of all. Harrods, that great department store on Brompton Road in London, well, they would see themselves as a very, very high-end department store. Wouldn't you agree? So high price, high quality. And quality on the bottom axis is determined by the three-legged stool. And price, of course, is the vertical axis. Selfridges. Selfridges, who I'm going to tell you some more about later on. Selfridges are also a very, very high-end store. But in terms of their positioning, that's where they might be. Now, guys, I'm not going to get scientific here. This is just a picture on a graph. But broadly speaking, I'm sure you'd agree. Selfridges is also a 5-star store. But the average price of their product is not quite as high as Harrods. And indeed, many would argue the service is not quite as good as Harrods. I don't quite agree, but there you go. But in contrast to both of those, let's just take Debenhams. And this is not saying anything negative about Debenhams, it just happens to be their market positioning compared to the other two. Now, when you decide where you want to be in your brand positioning, that will help you determine what does good look like under product, under people, and under place. I've done this work with Harrods. I've done this work with Selfridges. I've done this work with Jimmy Choo shoes. I've done this work at Karstadt, Dubai Duty Free, and it works. It absolutely works every single time. And it will work for small stores, large stores, no matter what business you're in. When you determine your positioning, now we've been talking all morning about brand Lebanon. That same matrix would also work for helping you determine where is brand Lebanon. I've worked with the Irish Tourist Board. I've worked with Bahrain Development Authority. I've worked with the Abu Dhabi Port Authority who are trying to get investment in. And I know that when you start thinking about brand Lebanon, now I'm not going to go off on a tangent here, don't worry, but when you want to talk about brand Lebanon and position brand, decide where should brand Lebanon be compared to the other cities or the other countries in the region. Because you are competing. You are competing with other countries. So whether you are a country, whether you're a hotel, whether you're a retailer, or whether you're a bank, this is a very powerful exercise, and I would encourage you strongly to do it. You can do it on the back of an envelope. So, I want to tell you about Selfridges. Who has been to Selfridges on Oxford Street in London? Oh yeah, not surprised. Okay, yeah, mainly the females, okay. Well, let me tell you about Selfridges. Selfridges is a very iconic brand. It's been around since 1909, and it was founded by an American guy called Harry Gordon Selfridge, who was quite an innovator in his time. He was the first, for example, to come up with this idea of a bargain basement. He's one of the first retailers to bring product outside the counter to let customers touch it, rather than serving behind the counter only, and many, many more other initiatives. But when I came, they were bought over by the current owner in 2004. And the current owner is the Weston family, who also have a business in Ireland, who I had been consulting with for some time on transitioning through change. So I was invited to work with Selfridges in the beginning of '05. And here's just a snapshot of what I found when I arrived in Selfridges. So I'm not going to go through every line, but just to give you a feeling for the kind of things. On the right-hand side, they had no digital strategy at that time. Yes, there was a lot of talk about omni-channel. In fact, it wasn't even called omni-channel then. It was called multi-channel. So they had no digital strategy. Also, customer service levels were quite poor, even though they were measuring customer service through mystery shopping. And the mystery shopping results were quite strong. I didn't believe them. And the Irish CEO, who I worked very closely with, likewise didn't believe them. But when we studied the mystery shopping results, we could tell why, because they were asking the wrong questions. And the bar hadn't been raised enough. So we changed all of that. So there's some of the weaknesses on the right-hand side, but externally then there were also some threats. For example, brands like Louis Vuitton, Chanel, Gucci, Prada, and so on were becoming very powerful. And they were insisting on having their own space in store as concessions. They didn't trust that the retailer could do it as well as them. And that's continuing to grow as a phenomenon with concession brands. Another issue that was emerging, that we spotted at the time, was that the premium, there was a lot more wealth, and London was becoming a hot spot for visitors, and there was lots of wealthy visitors to London, and Selfridges was missing out because of the average pricing. The product mix just wasn't quite right for that higher-end customer. So there's quite a lot to be done. And then, of course, the two Irish guys come along and saying, well, we need to change. And of course, we got a lot of resistance. The store was a beautiful store. It was an old store. It had been underinvested in for years. There was a very old smell. I don't mean an unpleasant smell, but an old smell, almost musty in places. Quite a lot of carpets fraying and shop fit, which was just not up to scratch. The people, some very, very good people. Some very, very good people who are passionate, but also lots of people who are not passionate, and lots of people who are quite happy with the status quo. And then, of course, these two Irish guys come along trying to shake it up And it didn't go down very well, of course. I mean, there was resistance, as there often is resistance to change. But don't forget, you'll often hear the expression, people resist change. I see it differently. If people resisted change, we wouldn't be flying, would we? We wouldn't have mobile phones in our pockets. We wouldn't drive on motorways. Of course, people embrace change when they can see the value of that change. When they see the value of that new thing and they can see the benefit that's in it for them, they will embrace change. What people resist is coercion. People don't want to be forced into change. People will embrace change if they're involved in it. And it was very interesting to hear Alex this morning at the panel discussion talking about brand Lebanon. And one of the key messages that came through for me was one word: collaboration. The efforts that have gone into brand Lebanon, and I knew nothing about it because this is my first, but not my last, this is my first time in the Lebanon. And when I heard the presentations this morning, I smiled inside to myself. Because if all of that is true, thumbs up to you guys, because that collaborative approach is what is the secret to any change. Whether we're talking change at a micro level for your organization, or whether we're talking about change at a macro level for a whole country. The same thinking, the same approach, the same methodology, the same steps. So what do we do in Selfridges? Now, I'm not going to go through every line here because otherwise we'd be here all day, and I love talking about it. And because I'm Irish, I talk too much. But I will cut to the chase. Some of the things that we did at the very beginning was we redefined the vision. So Selfridges did have a vision, but we shook it up. We changed it. And we talked about, we looked at what's happening in the world, we looked at the competition, we looked at customers and how they're changing, and we redefined the vision. And we have a vision statement. I'm going to tell it to you. You're not going to remember, it doesn't matter. But just to give you a sense of, Selfridges want to be the destination for the most extraordinary customer experiences. That's their vision. Now, I'm not going to get all North American on you, don't worry, but vision statements, guys, are very powerful. Because what they do is they help shape a North Star for a business. When you've determined, and by the way, a visual way of presenting or representing a vision statement is the matrix that I showed you a few minutes ago. If you, in your organization, decide you want to be in the top right-hand corner, that's saying a multitude. That's saying an awful lot about your vision for the company. Can you imagine if you went to your frontline people and relayed that matrix to them? You don't have to get fancy with vision statements if you don't want to. Even the visual exercise is incredibly powerful because that's a very, very strong statement. That's saying to your frontline people, that's the standard we want to be. That's the North Star for our business. That's where we want to go. We want to kick ass with our competitors. That's how we're going to do it, by being in whatever position you believe is the right one for you. We also defined what does good look like. So under each leg of the stool, product, people, and place, we went into workshop mode. And we involved the guys at the front line and managers and buyers, of course, and everybody. And we started defining what does good look like for product, for people, and for place in all different departments. So the food had different answers, the food hall. The menswear had different answers. The women's wear had different answers. The homewares had different answers. But they were all relative to the positioning in the brand matrix. And once we defined where we wanted to be in that brand matrix, the answer to the questions was easy. What does good look like under product? The words flowed off our tongues because we had said that's where we wanted to be. And I would put it to you that it is as easy for you to do it too. The challenge is doing it. Don't just leave here today and say, it was interesting or it wasn't interesting. I would encourage you strongly to have a go. It's a very, very powerful exercise. Look, I'm not going to go through each of these in detail, but just to know, we were quite sophisticated in our approach to driving all of this change. Of course, there's lots of communications, lots of training, lots of incentives, lots of consequences. Involving the frontline managers was critical. And of course, we were also very focused on what we call service recovery. In other words, handling complaints. Now, this model is a very powerful one. It works every single time, I promise you. That when you approach, now here's one interesting point I'd like to make, however. We went through a massive change program in Selfridges. But can I tell you, the only time that we used the word change, hello? The only time we used the word change was in the boardroom. The only time we used the word change was in the boardroom. Because change scares people. So we didn't call it a change program. What we did call it was a customer service program. We all knew what we meant by that. But what we were doing was flipping the organization in a different way, totally focused on the customer. I said to you 15 minutes ago, I'm passionate about customer service. Now, when you develop and translate that passion to your frontline people, you will kick ass. You will get sales. It will drive change in your business. Become customer-centric. Just in case there's any cynics out there, did this work? Did this have the impact, the desired impact? Well, let me just give you some sense of numbers. When we initially got involved in 2004, profits at that time were £45 million. And then over the years, even through the global crash, now I appreciate London is special, but even through the global crash, profits grew. And last year they hit 200 million. That's phenomenal growth. Pounds we're talking here, British pounds. This is phenomenal growth in a time of amazing global crisis. And I absolutely believe that it was all about changing the culture. The collaboration, getting people involved, engaging frontline people. Now, Selfridges has 5,000 people, by the way. 3,000 of them are concessions. Now, can you imagine how difficult it would be to get concessions to come on board with the Selfridges brand? When you think about Louis Vuitton and Hermes and Chanel and so on, Tiffany, they're concessions. And to get them to come onto the train that had left the station called Selfridges brand, that was a challenge. But we did it. We did it through great collaboration. Effectively, what we had here, folks, was a culture change. Culture is the way we do things. That's how you define culture. It's the way we do things around here. It's attitudes, it's behaviors, it's processes, it's interactions, it's communications, it's decision-making, it's meetings. All of this is culture. Whether we're talking about at organizational level or whether we're talking at country level, what we're trying to do here is get the culture right. If you get your culture right, nobody can copy that. Culture beats strategy any day. We were brought in to work with Harrods about 2 years ago. Would you believe they didn't have a strategy? They're the most successful department store retailer in the world. Profits last year of £300 million. When we got involved, they did not have a strategy. And yet they were growing year on year. Now they were flawed as well. And that's why they wanted to look at strategy. But why were they so successful? I believe it was because of their culture. They've got an amazingly strong culture that's driving the premium market. You have a culture in your business. But are you on top of the culture in your business? Or has it just happened? Because culture develops. Culture, every organization has a culture. It just shapes over time. It could be part of heritage. It could be part of your leadership style. It could be because of where you're located, environmental things, whatever. You have a culture. But is it the right culture? Is it a culture that embraces change? Is it a culture that focuses on the customer? Or is it all just about sales? Now, I'm as commercial as you are. I'm just as commercial as you are. But I see the path to achieving financial results a little bit differently. Because I've seen it over 25 years. That when you focus on culture, that when you get your folks doing things in a certain way, for example, being totally customer focused. That will drive results. Okay, so collaboration. I know we had Alex and his colleagues on the panel this morning talking about brand Lebanon and the value of collaboration. I completely believe that. Like I said in Selfridges, that was the secret to success. Getting people involved, asking the front line, what do you think? Engaging them, just like you're doing here in brand Lebanon. It's absolutely the right thing to do. So if I may come to a close and just present some challenges to you as an organization, as a commercial entity, or indeed as brand Lebanon. What are your challenges? Well, I would say, how are you going to differentiate? How are you going to differentiate? Because if you don't differentiate, you are not relevant. If you're just me too, why should customers buy from you? How are you going to differentiate? Take time to think about it. Get out an envelope, a scrap of paper, and draw a matrix, and consider the environment that you are trading in. Plot your competitors in that matrix. It doesn't have to be scientific. Like I said, you can do it in the back of an envelope. But do it. And then think about what's optimum for your brand. Because if you find yourself stuck in there in the middle with lots of other competitors in the same position on that matrix, you are me too. And that's not enough anymore. It's just not enough. You've got to differentiate. By differentiating and particularly focusing on your customers, take the risk out of it for your customers. It therefore becomes a no-brainer. I'm going to shop in this guy's store. I'm going to go to this hotel, this restaurant. It's a no-brainer. They're that different. That's such a good experience. Take the risk out of it for your customers. Now, just for your comfort, I'm not going to go through each step here because clearly, for example, we heard some great stories about brand Lebanon and how the change and how the planning is coming together. And what I found very encouraging was that as I never met Alex before you did, by the way. So Alex, are you here? No, Alex, I met Alex for the first time last night. And when I heard the panel discussion this morning, I was very reassured on your behalf for brand Lebanon. I was very reassured by the steps that are being taken. Because what is being taken are the classic steps in how to manage change. And the key message in there is collaboration. Like I said, I'm not going to go through each step, but just take comfort from knowing that there are steps. You don't have to embark on this journey on your own. Even if you don't want to get help, there's lots of ways of researching the right way to manage change for your business. Just take comfort from knowing that. And it is about getting ready, proper preparation in the first place, then getting stuck in, go, and don't stop. Don't just think it's a one-off when you get there, that's it. I'm afraid it's not. Because of Carsten talked about it, the pace of change, the speed of change, the volume of change, the complexity, the ambiguity of change. It's not going away. So once you start thinking like this, you will never stop. It's a culture shift both for you in your mind and for your people. And that's what you've got to do. Finally, think about yourself here. You're here at this conference to hear some thoughts about the world and how it's changing, both for brand Lebanon and indeed to get some ideas for your business. So by you being here, I'm assuming that you're a leader in your business. And leadership, how you create followership with your teams is critical. So think about your own style here. Because, for example, if you are all about the task and less about people, well, that makes you very directive and not very engaging or inclusive. And that's a kind of a very strong telling people to do it because you said so. Well, guys, that doesn't work anymore. That was back in the 1950s. And the millennials who are coming your way as employees and as customers, will not accept that anymore. You've got to include them. Of course, then, if you're the other side, if you're too fluffy and all about people and not focused on the agenda, well, then you're seen to be a softie, a rollover, too easy. That's not the right answer either. And certainly you don't want to be in the bottom left-hand corner, which is like abdicating, like withdrawing, not caring, not even embracing change. That is how you will fail. Clearly, the ideal place for us all to be is in the top right-hand corner, where we are collaborative, we're engaging, there's a nice balance between support and challenge. We are supporting when we need to support. We're challenging when we know we're hitting resistance. And we know we've got to drive on and get people on side. But just telling them to do it won't work. We've got to engage them, collaborate with them, involve them, make them feel part of it. I'm sure you're starving. You'll be glad to know I'm finished. So I want to maybe leave you with some final thoughts. Whether you agree with anything that I've said is up to you. I'm simply giving you my experiences of 25 years working with some amazing retailers, some amazing hotels, some amazing banks around the world. What I've shared with you is not based on research. It's based on actual practice. These things have all worked. And what I'm doing is I've simply tried to stand back from all of the projects that I've been involved in for 25 years and try to make sense of them all and organize them into a flow of thinking that can help you just to get your head in a practical way around how you can drive change in your business. So I wish you very well with that. But just the final takeaways, if you will. I'd like you to think, embrace change rather than be scared of it or hope that it's going to go away. It's not going to go away. Embrace it. Face up to it and say, okay, it is what it is. Now, how do we engage with this? Also, engage stakeholders, which is a collaboration piece. Get your people involved. And of course, oh, by the way, in terms of engaging and collaborating, that can also include suppliers. I'm working with Fortnum and Mason at the moment in Piccadilly. Anybody know Fortnum and Mason? It's a very old, iconic, 300-year-old tea store. And they're doing very, very well. But not only are we engaging frontline people, and we're also engaging suppliers, getting them involved in the change, because they are key stakeholders. Plan carefully. There's lots of research to show that change programs usually fail. And the ones that fail don't fail due to bad execution. They fail due to poor planning in the first place. So I urge you strongly to plan carefully. Think about it. What are you trying to achieve? What's your positioning in the marketplace? Where do you want to be against your competition? And then engage your people, involve them, and then plan for it. Thank you for listening. And it's over to you, Mr. Saad.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess maybe if we learned a lot of lessons, but if I can summarize two important lessons that I learned is first, we have to adopt change, otherwise we become irrelevant, and we have to focus on customer experience. And I guess we have to pray that China keeps growing. I open it up for question and answer, please. Any questions?
Well, may I say, we're going to be hanging around here for the day, and if over coffee or over lunch you want to chat to Karsten or I, please don't hesitate to come over and say hello. Also, by the way, for anybody that's planning on being around tomorrow morning, I'm doing a master class tomorrow morning on the best use of metrics in retail. So again, I'll be sharing with you best practices of how major retailers, what they focus on to drive their business. So if you care to join me for that, I'd love to see you.
We have a question over there.
Yes.
Oh, we have, sorry.
Hello, my name is Anastasia Sayer. And I am very fond of Toyota production system. So when I saw Toyota in the list of the company that they have a different mindset in order for them to stand in this aggressive environment, economic environment, I can explain why they do have this great success, and it can be related directly to putting people at the center. And this is after a long history of them having faced problem and not laying off people. By not thinking only financial thinking, acquisition and sale. Secondly, by not robotizing their people, they say people, they come to Toyota to think, and this is how they build their future ideas and the future business. And thirdly, by not rendering their job a commodity. They make them love their job and give them a meaningful job. So if we think a little bit the Toyota way, complexity, globalization, uncertainty will be not a big threat to us if we want to just be ready for the future challenges. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank you.
I think
thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
اوكي، شكرا لكم جميعا، شكرا لجميع الحاضرين. دكتور ازهري بطلب منك انه بدنا ناخذ صوره تذكاريه كمان هون بالنص. To take a picture please. في هلا لانش بريك وبنستأنف المؤتمر عند الساعة 3 مبدئيا.
See you after a short lunch break.